May I please have your full and undivided attention? It is time for the Paranormal Rundown. Hello, this is Cedric Dankworth-Smythe. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all fans of the paranormal, the supernatural, the unusual, the entertaining, the terrifying, the horrifying, and those things that go bump in the night and in the daytime too. This is the one and only Paranormal Rundown, where the lads, the gang of nerds, choose from over 2,700 carefully curated paranormal topics. Tonight we present the Paranormal Rundown Countdown, Part 3, covering Season 1, Episodes 11 through 15. Almost every one of these episodes had a guest. We discussed Tulpas, God's creation of aliens, pink narwhals in the streets, paranormal guidance from God, various demon faces, the Nephilim, the Dead Sea Scrolls, ghosts, random number generators, and more paranormal wonder than you can shake a stick at, no matter how possessed that stick may be.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Rundown. We are in the middle of our countdown to 2025 series of episodes. I guess a little past the middle. We are on part 3.
Of 4.
Of 4. One more to go. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, Father Mike is not with us today, and JJ is recovering from his worldly travels. So I'm just here with Vic. I guess that's all right. He's a pretty good guy. So we have...
every other Thursday and bank holidays.
Exactly. So we have episodes 11 through 15 from season 1 today, and it's a pretty long episode, but I think you'll enjoy it. We have a lot of great guests here, and we're looking forward to get into it. Vic, you got any thoughts?
Well, no, I have been pleasantly surprised when I've gone back and listened to these old episodes of just how quickly the rundown became the rundown. Of just, I don't know, it's like a big boulder that you start pushing down the mountain and it just takes off of its own accord. And you don't have a great deal of control as to exactly where it goes.
That's very true.
Yeah,
we never know where an episode's going to end up. It is pretty funny.
So the first topic that we've got this week is we've listed it as the Narwhal Mandela Effect.
We have referred back to this, and this is a funny one to start with. We have referred back to this clip in every episode that we have wound up talking about Tulpas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Something about those narwhals. But it is funny that several of us don't remember narwhals when we were younger.
I do.
And, well, that's because you came from a different timeline than I did.
Different timeline, yeah. Yeah, we had lots of narwhals in Louisiana. That's true.
I bet. Well, here we go. Let's get into it.
Just a quick anecdote. I did not, and this is probably really embarrassing to admit, but I did not know that narwhals existed until probably the age of like 17. I just never came across the description of a narwhal.
Did you learn that through Elf?
I did. I did. Probably. No, I don't remember, but
bye, buddy.
Yeah.
I didn't know about him. Don't feel bad. I didn't know about him until my kids started singing that stupid narwhal song.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean,
hey, there's a conspiracy
never
for
came
you,
up, right?
There's a conspiracy for you. We all kind of learned about narwhals at the same time. Maybe they didn't exist before.
Yeah. Maybe it's one of those what is it? Multi-dimension theories or whatever,
Right?
where like things changed when it split.
Oh my gosh.
The Mandela.
It's like a
Effect type
Mandela
of
thing.
deal.
Yeah.
That's
Something like that.
well. Wait a minute. What's the narwhal song?
I don't remember. I remember
on,
my
Dad.
kids singing. No. Hey, look, my kids, like my youngest is 23, so it's been a while back. But I remember.
Well,
them
I
singing about
might make
narwhals.
use of 15 seconds fair use of the narwhal song.
Why not?
Narwhals swimming in the ocean, causing a commotion, cause they are so awesome. Narwhals swimming in the ocean, pretty big and pretty wide, they beat a polar bear in a fight. Like an underwater unicorn, they've got a kick-ass facial harm, they're the Jedi of the sea. Stop Cthulhu, awaiting ye. Narwhals.
So, Dave, really, I'm not much of a fan of the Mandela Effect.
No.
No, not really, really not. I mean, I find it kind of arrogant. And we've discussed situations where our memory is not quite as good as we might think it should be.
Which is true. I get that. Memory is extremely faulty.
Extremely faulty.
I totally understand.
But with me, it's a very mixed kind of thing. I can be watching a movie with my spouse, say a movie from 1980, and as I'm watching the movie, the dialogue, I will see the dialogue in my head. It's like it's going. Those things they've got on what is it, Times Square in New York, where there's a
Like the ticker, the streamer
there's a
going
headline coming across. Saddam Hussein captured in Spider Hole. It's going right across there. This is how I'm seeing it in my head. And so I'll wait till just the right moment, just a few seconds before that line shows up, and I'll say the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then my wife will look at me and say, "How do you do that?" I don't know. So
Well, look, the whole Mandela Effect thing to me, Mandela Effect, is I found interesting as a concept until our last discussion on it. And this is in season 2. So this was, I don't know, 2 or 3 episodes back, maybe, before the countdown. And it was brought up about the monocle.
the Monopoly monocle.
The Monopoly monocle. And look, I've talked to my wife. My wife is a Monopoly nut. Okay. She loves Monopoly. And both of us clearly remember the monocle being on the little guy, rich guy with the tux with the tails and the hat. I don't ever remember him without the monocle. So that's a pretty distinct thing to remember.
Well,
Mandela, whether he died in prison or not, I remember him. I remember it where he died in prison. But, I mean, it was current events. It was news. Did I pay that much attention to it? I don't know. But I grew up playing Monopoly. I remember that. That is a very specific thing to remember. So, I don't know. I think there's something to it.
Well, I just want to see how far down the false memories go. And so one of my favorite things is, of course, newspapers.com.
Right.
Okay. So it's amazing what you can find. I mean, I was having a fight with, not a fight, but a gentle argument with, I guess he's a nephew-in-law, maybe a great nephew-in-law. But we were talking about Chick-fil-A. And how there's something very specific about the Chick-fil-A logo. And so I got on newspapers.com and went back to the opening of the first Chick-fil-A in Georgia. When it stopped being the Dwarf House and started becoming Chick-fil-A. And by golly, there was the logo, from 1950.
The way he remembered it.
No, the way I remembered it.
Oh, okay.
The way I remembered it.
So you're saying that there may have been some instances where it was the way you remember it, but modern version of it is not.
Well, I can remember things like just being working in an architecture firm of, we could go and pay somebody. Let's say we could pay a hospital system. This is a confession, $1,000 to use their logo in something we were creating, or somebody unknown could get into some kind of graphics program and come extremely close to replicating that logo,
but not quite close enough to be sued for trademark infringement.
Not quite close enough to be sued for trademark infringement.
Gotcha.
Okay, so if they said, "Well, you've just copied," no. See the little curly Q in this section of it? It's not there.
This is just it came to me in a dream last night, and I just drew it.
I am certain that is a lot of what this whole thing is about. Is someone trying to copy a logo, getting it just a little bit wrong.
Okay, so then let's go back to the original case. I don't know if it is the original, but the one it's named after. So are you suggesting that maybe there were some reports that Mandela died in prison?
Oh, yeah.
That were inaccurate?
Oh, there definitely could be.
Therefore, what we're remembering is those reports.
Reports.
They were fake news.
Well, it was much less impactful, but I remember very clearly a newscast that said Kenneth Branagh died today, and Kenneth Branagh, do you know who that is?
No.
Okay, he's the actor who played Gilderoy Lockhart in the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Okay. He's a very, very well-respected Shakespearean actor because he's one of these guys. I don't know where you go in England to become a knight-level Shakespearean actor, but there are a lot of those guys who have. Mm-hmm. Okay, there must be like the Oxford Academy of Shakespearean Theatrics or something. and
so where Keanu Reeves went.
Yeah, that's where Keanu Reeves went. Yeah.
That's a reference. You guys won't get it, but we actually have in an episode later on in this someone who talked about Keanu Reeves. The clip's not in there, but his replaying of I think Hamlet. And how horrible it was.
Yeah, and my mind goes, alas, poor Yorick. Bogus.
Dude. Okay, sorry.
All right. So we've gone way too far on this, but we
really have.
But anyway, the second topic is
you have a task.
Yes,
you have a takeaway from this,
and that is
your job is to find the newspaper article, the fake news article that said Mandela died in prison. That's a very reasonable. You find that, and then the next time the Mandela Effect comes up in the rundown,
then we can go back to that. All right, no, that's actually something I'm surprised I haven't done. Okay, so we're looking for newspaper evidence of Mandela death.
That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, the second topic we're going to talk about today is consciousness and simulation theory. Are we living in a simulation? I spent most of my life simulating, and I say we don't live in a simulation. But
and I say the opposite, which we talk about in here.
I
think we look at a simulation different. I don't think, and we didn't say this in the discussion, or I didn't say it, but the type of simulating that you're doing is a simulation that has a very direct purpose.
Yep.
Okay. And
it can run on a PC.
Sure. Well, I mean, the
programmed by a dumbass
could run on some massive quantum PC, maybe, but that is a focused type of simulation. Mm-hmm. And I understand people would not have a simulated universe like this just for that purpose. But there are other reasons to create a simulation. So I think we're just looking at it differently. But go ahead. We'll get into it.
And we'll get into that. Anyway, let's get into consciousness and simulation theory.
I feel like the evolution of the human psyche and everything that comes from that concept of, we don't really know anything outside of ourselves. I mean, I don't know if you guys have studied philosophy. It's been a minute since I've actually formally studied it, but I think it was like Descartes or somebody who was like making the argument that you literally cannot prove anything outside of your own consciousness.
Correct. We were talking.
You guys can't prove. You can't prove that we're sitting here having a discussion and that we are all actually separate entities in consciousness. And you also can't prove that you just didn't pop into existence 20 seconds ago with all the memories and all that stuff in your mind. So to me, if we're talking about like branching multiverse theories and which are we in a B universe now, where we were in the A universe before, and then suddenly crap hit the fan, and then and then things just feel like off for the last like 5 or 6 years. Everyone's talking about how it just feels like everything is not on the same track that it was years ago. And I have to wonder if that's like, history repeating. It's probably psychological purely. It's probably not anything supernatural or like, something really crazy like metaphysical. But that I think that you can't have this conversation, even going all the way back to the giant of Kandahar. Like you can't have this conversation about what has existed in history versus what we know as a fact right now. And the blurring of the lines, like the Mandela Effect. I mean, it all stems back to the perception of the human psyche and how we take in information and share information and how we, more importantly, remember information. I feel like you can apply that to any conspiracy theory.
Any conspiracy theory. Well, I think the important thing you're talking about there, I mean, we were talking about this last rundown. Okay, where we started talking about the whole Maxwell's demon approach. I mean, I'm not Maxwell's
the
demon.
Brain in the
No, not Maxwell's demon. I'm making the same mistake. The Cartesian evil genius conjecture. Okay, where the idea that Descartes put forth was, I could be a brain in a jar or a box or something, and there is a very powerful demon who's decided that his entire purpose in existence is to fool me into thinking that I'm a real man, okay, that I'm living a real life. And so, he's just bombarding me with this information. Well, I mean, just the way that the limitations of logic and human knowledge go, you can't disprove that. You can create a heck of a lot of evidence that seems to make it unlikely, but that word proof, that's a step that you can only take, as far as I know, in pure logic and in math using the rules of pure logic.
True. And now you have the modern incarnation of all of that with this idea of, we exist in a
simulation.
Yeah, in a simulation. And especially with all of these huge glitch in the matrix types of videos that you'll find everywhere nowadays.
There are a lot of them. Well, I don't think we live in okay, let's do a poll here. Most of my career has been spent creating simulations. That's what I've spent a lot of my life doing. And I know how hard it is to create a simulation, and I know how incredibly difficult it is to get anything useful out of a simulation. Now, of course, I'm not a god level kind of mind, but I just don't think we live in a simulation. What about you guys?
One thing that I wanted to add onto the previous point there, and I agree with you. I think that like I would err on the side that reality is reality, however you want to perceive it. It is how it is, and there might be some like underlying mathematical constants or whatever that duplicate or seem like a simulation. But here's a twist to that concept. Why do we have so many strange occurrences that come and go into our reality, yet we have no definitive proof? So we have ghosts, and we have some hints that ghosts and spirits exist in our reality, but we also have a reality that has spiritualism, religious experiences. And on top of that, we also have supposed extraterrestrials who are evolved a million years. It seems extremely unlikely that you would have a religious narrative be true that some people claim, but also have extraterrestrials who are so far evolved beyond us, living for millions of years in different parts of the universe coming to visit us. It seems like the two just don't fit in the same reality. So if we have all those things existing, it seems to me the only way that they could exist simultaneously is if the universe was some kind of simulation where someone could pop code in, pop code out, make things occur a certain way, present a certain way, and then withdraw. Just show it long enough for someone to get a glimpse of it, or better yet, if someone actually does get a firm grasp on it, rip it out before it spreads to the rest of your code and everybody else gets tainted, whatever. So like, I don't know. What do you think about that perspective that we have all these things, aliens, religion, spirits, supernatural stuff, all existing on the same plane? We have a little bit of evidence for all of it. So how could all be true and exist simultaneously if there wasn't someone moving the pull strings higher on a higher level?
So I definitely see the perspective. I get what you're saying, especially the idea of, hey, I'm gonna alter the simulation. I'm gonna run this code in and see what happens, and then pull it back out. I get that. I actually had this conversation the other night with my youngest son, where he said basically, I don't think you can have God and aliens. Right?
Really?
He's like, the two don't coexist in the same universe. Of course, for me, that was pretty simple arguments to say.
Did he explain why?
No, he couldn't explain why. In his brain, they just don't fit. But my perspective is, and this is what I told him, is that there's nothing in the Bible or tradition that says we're the only thing that God created.
No.
Right? And so it's perfectly reasonable for God to have created things before us, to create things after us that we just don't know about because it wasn't part of what we needed to know through the Bible or through tradition, right, of Christians. So
yeah, that's an interesting concept that I've heard among my circle of friends, not my fellow tinfoil hatters here on the Paranormal Rundown, that, well, how can religion be correct? How can this be this if aliens exist? But I always give, Dean and I are big gamers. Mm-hmm. And I always give the example of you're playing a video game. And we use this example with the concept of souls, and reincarnation. Like, this is your character. You could load another save. If I am playing a video game in the sense that I'm playing Civ 5 or I'm playing a Total War game in which I have ultimate control of the world around me as the creator, I can create different cultures and species that have different beliefs in the sense that eventually they'll interact with one another, but I have a direct hand in how they develop and how they evolve and how they process things. So who's to say there isn't, hypothetically speaking, there isn't one creator running multiple experiments at the same time with regards to creation?
Once again, nothing.
And this is, I've heard you say before, Vic, simulations are tough. I don't think you would do simulations just for the fun of it. But that's what video game worlds are.
Yes.
That's where they're moving, right? When you think of MMOs and the character, the NPC creation, the storylines, all of this stuff, these are getting to the point to where they're almost simulations.
They are simulations, right? But you also see lots and lots of things where you have a pair of boots walking around without a person in them, or where you have, the donkey with incredibly long hair. This guy, they're all.
But that's just a matter of advancement in technology.
That's just a matter of
look at No Man's Sky. Anybody played No Man's Sky?
I've never played that.
Right?
I have.
I mean, unlimited worlds. Now, there's a certain limit to the amount of variability. I haven't played it in a couple years. My son's been playing it more. I see there's a lot of advancements in the game, but still, it was fairly simple, and yet there was this endlessness to it that was amazing. And I mean, that I don't think that was that difficult to create. And I bet you a company started from scratch today and finished a new one of those 10 years from now, 5 years from now, it would be 10 times more advanced than No Man's Sky was.
Well, and you've got Starfield that just came out, 2 months ago? And yeah, besides like NPCs just randomly teleporting through a floor, which happens a lot because it's a Bethesda game.
Well, yeah, so maybe that's what ghosts are, right? Maybe those are the bugs in the simulation.
The bugs in the simulation.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I absolutely love about our conversation with these guys, Chris and Dean have the Wandering Road podcast. They really do like to think deeply about things.
They do.
This entire episode, I mean, we pulled out, I think this was the most clips I pulled out of one episode for this season. There's 4 of them. We just had some great conversation. And we've had great conversations since. We really need to have them back soon. But they really do have such a dynamic because Chris comes at things very differently than Dean. Dean's probably the closest thing we've had to a real skeptic on the show. And yet he doesn't rule things out. He's open to these ideas. And it's a lot of fun. So I thought we had some great conversations. So the next one we have is about aliens and whether they could be a creation of God. Is there some sort of conflict on whether aliens and God can coexist? What our thoughts were on that? I think we started out with my youngest son had made a statement, well, you can't have God and aliens.
Which is a statement that makes me immediately go, why? Why not?
Well, and this was the point. He didn't know why either. So it just didn't make sense to him based on what he knew that both realities could be true. So it's a good conversation on that.
All right, let's get to it.
Because it's going to bug me, and this may be a conversation for a later time, I had never, ever had a thought in my mind that aliens and God could not coexist. That's never, ever occurred to me at all. But your son, he brought this up in conversation, and he wasn't able to tell you why.
Yeah. Nope. He's just like, no, the two just don't go together,
You know what it could be, and this is something I didn't get to interject with earlier, which I can probably do now, but I don't want to put words in your son's mouth, but it could very well be that he may be thinking more from the Judeo-Christian perspective from that idea, because I can see you could have 2 arguments. You can have the one argument where it'd be hard to have aliens exist in a Judeo-Christian world where, Jesus is the Son of God and he takes on a human form. And it's, he being the Son of God and the Trinity is specifically focused on the saving of souls of humans. And as humans exist in the realm of the world or whatever. So there's that argument, like how can aliens exist if they are advanced beings with intelligence? And they look, that's another conversation for another day too, by the way, like they're bipedal, they have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes. Like, why do they look like us? They should theoretically look like something completely different if they evolved elsewhere. But there's that conversation, the idea that how can aliens exist in the world of a Judeo-Christian religion? But then you can also say, how can aliens exist with just a general God that can create anything, including, like Chris was saying, any type of religion to fill whatever gap human need or whatever in history, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, etc. So I think if I were to fall into one of those camps, I would say that it would be hard for a God to exist with extraterrestrials in a realm where one religion was right, where one religion was more on like more accurate for reality. But I think it's more possible that there could still be a general God creating certain religions and certain things, but also create humans and extraterrestrials at different times, or at least introduce those elements of life to lead to evolution. But then you get into the argument with is in that case, is God really all loving, all knowing, like some people would think or perceive of that type of God to be? Because in order for that God to be like that, he would probably have to, or it would have to deceive to some degree by injecting a narrative into humanity that is slightly skewed from what reality is, if that makes sense. And that goes back to the whole, yeah.
It's sort of like this is God's playground and he's just experimenting.
Sandbox.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then in what way how would that have room for people of a devout religion where they want to believe in one type of structure as opposed to all the structures? And if so, how could there be a God that would create all those structures and not be at least partially a deceiver?
Let's just stay in the Christian realm.
Sense.
I mean, if you go to a lot of primitive Baptist churches, Pentecostal churches, these kind of places, they would say, no, God didn't create anything except what's here on earth. We're the only living sentient beings. But if you go to the Catholic Church, they will say nothing stops God from creating whatever he wants. If we find later that there are extraterrestrial beings, then we simply have the same obligation toward them as we do to humans. Not a point of contention at all.
And I think the one thing that you said, Dean, which kind of stuck in my mind with regards to extraterrestrials looking like us, and I think that would maybe give some credence to God can coexist with aliens, because if God created us, in the Bible it says God created man in his image. What's to stop him from creating
other
extraterrestrials in his image? Right. But it doesn't have to be exactly, because we can't assume that, we look exactly like God, but the blueprint, in the sense, the bipedal and the two arms, the two legs, the fingers and the toes and whatnot could possibly,
no,
I feel like I'm reaching, but
I don't even see a problem with God creating insectoids. There's nothing says that the things that he creates have to be in his image. It just says
man in his image,
created man in his image, right? So there's nothing to say that out on a planet 10 quadrillion light years away, he's like, oh, I think, that's a technical number, right, Vic? You're the math guy. 10 quadrillion miles away, and he's like, yeah, let's make these things that look like insects. Right? And we'll give them some intelligence and, I made this thing over on Earth.
It really worked well.
Really cool. They were like stick people or like stick insects. Let's make it something like that. And then, give it intelligence. I mean, that's God's prerogative. There's not.
Or if you follow the logic in the movie Evolution, y'all have seen that one, then everything starts off at lizard level, and then eventually goes to primate level, and then you keep going from there. But more to Chris's point, I mean, you had the Cambrian explosion, which had such a huge, diverse period of life, which is captured in the Burgess shell. And then everything kind of narrowed down dramatically. And who knows? But I mean, it would seem to be highly improbable that unless we are the only successful blueprint for intelligent life, then we would be the standard that you would find on other worlds.
Well, one thing too to consider is if I totally am tracking with you guys on the idea that if you just talk about God as a creator, and you remove the concept itself of structured religion and life after death, spirituality and the soul and all that stuff, I think that it can totally work. You can totally have a being that created the universe and create different forms of advanced life at different times, at different places. But what happens when you try to fit in that back in that narrative of the soul? And one of the reasons why we're here to discuss like the paranormal and demons and the spiritual side, that kind of implies that there is another side of the veil that is not directly controlled by a, let's just say Judeo-Christian God or what we perceive as a good God. And then because there's good forces and evil forces spreading all the way back to Zoroastrianism. But if you fit that narrative back in there with the creator God creating other intelligent life forms outside of humanity, I'm just curious, how would you, not to challenge, but just out of curiosity, how would you guys fit that narrative back in there for, say, an advanced insectoid life form or civilization? Would they theoretically have the same kind of soul that we do? And if so, how would someone who believes in Judeo-Christian or like Christianity, where Jesus is like the one way to get to the other side, is that just for humanity? But at the same time, like he was the Trinity, so there couldn't be a fourth, insectoid savior. I'm just going up like really crazy here, but I'm just purely curious, like how you guys would perceive that.
Well, you're not going crazy at all. I mean, you're talking about very reasonable speculations. Well, okay, I'll just use myself as an example. And I know I'm stepping on JJ, and I'm sorry, JJ, and I'll shut up in a minute because I've talked too much tonight. But I'm a Christian, relatively devout Christian. I think about the ideas presented in the Bible. I think about the ideas presented through the various philosophers all the time. Every single day of my life, probably the main thing I think about is trying to reconcile these various philosophical systems of the universe. Now, I can tell you this. If suddenly tomorrow we find that we've got 1 million aliens on Titan, let's just use something close to us so we have some chance of ever communicating with it, doesn't impact my faith one bit. Not at all. Now, why is that the case? I don't know. Maybe it's simply because I have never felt that there's anything special about being human. There is something special about being sapient. What about you, Dave? I mean, is that going to impact your faith at all?
No. I mean, my view on this is simple. God's got his own deal. We know what's been exposed to us as far as our experience and as far as Scripture. Beyond that, I have no need to put constraints on God. God can do whatever he wants.
Correct.
There's nothing that says that this is all there is. After the 7 days, God didn't go on to start a brand new week on an 8th day and go create a bunch of insectoids on another planet. I mean, and however, maybe Jesus comes to them differently as a beautiful praying mantis. I have no idea. But I don't feel the need to put a barrier on that and say, well, just because it's not in the story that we're told, God can't do it. Because I'm sure he can.
You actually verbalized what I was thinking just now of not Jesus being an insectoid, but the whole concept of...
Yeah, I'm going to pay for that one.
But the whole concept of, let's say, like God created the entire universe, and I'm Catholic, so I'm not blaspheming. I'm just,
you're not
thinking out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So for the sake of this, the purpose of this discussion, God creates the universe, he creates humanity, then he creates these different aliens. I don't know if you guys played Halo, the Halo game series. Like he created the Covenant, the Covenant looking type of aliens. What's to say that Jesus or Moses or the different prophets that have existed were his mechanism of communicating with humanity? And if he didn't have that same mechanism with those different civilizations that he could have potentially created in other parts of the cosmos. So like, it doesn't have to be like married to our faith, because in the The same essence with Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. We all kind of lead down the same path. Like we all want to get to the same place to be with God. JJ could probably correct me if I'm incorrect on the Judaism aspect of it. But essentially, I think like it's the methodology that could potentially be used that could be different. So like Vic said, that if we found aliens on Titan, it wouldn't affect his faith. And me being a Catholic, it wouldn't affect mine as well, because I would just see them as, okay, they're just other creations of God, and I'll treat them the same way I would treat any other sentient living thing, with respect. And another thing I wanted to touch on is the hubris of humanity, that in this vast universe, we're the only sentient, intelligent, living being. And that goes back to the TikTok that JJ shared with me of Betty and Barney Hill. Yes, they could have potentially faked their abduction. But on the flip side to that, who's to say there aren't intelligent beings out there, way more advanced than us, that have existed for thousands upon thousands or even millions of years? I just can't wrap my head around the concept of the hubris that some people have, that human beings are the end-all be-all of intelligent life.
It's extreme hubris. As soon as there is organic life found anywhere other than Earth, statistically it becomes almost certain that there are more advanced civilizations.
Another topic that comes up frequently in the rundown is the topic of tulpas. I know we have generated that topic just internally among ourselves. Sylvia Schultz has talked about tulpas in a really kind of brilliant way. But in talking to Dean and Chris, that's one of the topics they care about a great deal.
Yeah, I brought it up because they had recently talked about it on their show. I think a couple of different times prior to coming on the rundown. And I just wanted to get into it a little bit more because, you know, as you'll hear, I'm a little skeptical of tulpas. Not that they're not possible, but I got to tell you, in any group online where, you know, the paranormal is discussed in depth, the idea of tulpas comes up all the time. You know, maybe it's something we created just because we thought the place was haunted, or because we think there's a Bigfoot. There's a Bigfoot's a tulpa and all of this, and I just don't buy it. I think there's, well, as you'll hear.
Well, I mean, plus, I mean, and this is part of the same culture, but the current, for a while there, Reddit really did drive the culture. Okay. And that's why you started getting things like Bodie McBoatface. You know, there was a public competition to name this new British sea vessel. And of course they were looking for things like, you know, the Hereford, you know, or the you know, things that sounded British and civilized. And they ended up naming the boat Bodie McBoatface.
So they let a 5-year-old name it.
They let a 5-year-old name it. Well, that's cool. What got the most votes. And I'm just thinking about you know, you're a captain in the British Navy. You know, you've gone to Cambridge. You've been trained to essentially be capable of taking over for the king or the queen. You know, let's say everything goes wrong. Just find any high-level British naval officer, and he should be able to manage things for a while. Just fine. And he's having to mention things like, we have all of our best ships running it around, making sure that our country is safe, including Bodie McBoatface. That
How about he's at the pub, having a pint, and a beautiful woman comes up and goes, "Oh, you're a captain. Oh, what are you captain of? Oh, I'm the captain of the SS Bodie McBoatface." I mean, that's got to hurt.
All right, let's hear this. Let's hear the clip.
I have heard you guys talk about tulpas on your show. And so here's my question. If we have this ability to create tulpas, right, through mass belief, it seems like we would have a lot more than Bigfoot and Slender Man, right, and UFOs. It seems to me that there would be, narwhals swimming down the street. Just
Godzilla,
an example from earlier.
Big giant octopuses, you name it.
Right. Unicorns dancing on the buildings. I don't know. We would have the dancing baby walking around, the original internet viral video, right? I mean, it seems like there would be a lot more there. How do you explain that?
I agree with you. There has to be some degree of constraint. Like we're clearly not. We don't have free reign over that sort of thing. So I suppose that it's totally feasible and even maybe probable that there is some entity that is aware of what we feel and what we believe in, and helping, or not helping in the sense that it's positive, but like ushering in, for whatever reason, certain things. Maybe it has to do with the population in terms of majority, or like the most people thinking about, because people say like prayer changes things, and I to a degree believe in that. Like I think that if you get enough people in a room focusing on one thing, maybe you really can alter the course of outcomes in a certain way, at least moderately. But I do think at the same time that you can never, ever get everyone in a room and think of like, purple dragon monster that spits cookies and then it'll suddenly appear. Like no matter how many people you get in a room, you're never going to get that. But
well,
you think,
go ahead.
I think there's I was just going to say, sorry.
No, go. Keep going, man.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right. I'll stop in like 3 seconds, but okay, pick it up. 3, 2, 1. So, I think if you ever got enough people in a room, you could probably never achieve that level of materialization, but it doesn't have to be materialization in the sense that it's a physical entity that pops into existence for however long. It could just be the progression of leading to something like that thing that you're wanting to happen. Maybe it's not exactly the outcome you're trying to get after, but maybe there is a progression that will lead to that outcome itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway, I'll stop there.
No, yeah, it's okay. I was going to say, I think that it's pretty much proven at this point that intent can change reality, right? There are experiments out there
at a macro scale, very problematic.
That's still reality.
Yes.
It's still reality, right? So there are experiments out there with quantum number generators where they get people in a room and they focus on even numbers versus odd numbers, and more even numbers start popping up. They focus on the odd numbers, more odd numbers start popping up. There is clearly something happening, but that is at a super, super simplistic level, right? When you talk about something complex like a figure of a certain shape that's going to walk around and have its own its own ability to make decisions and direct itself where it goes, what it does. I don't know if it's possible.
So, in case you aren't following, as everybody should, the current world of flat Earth, this last week there were people in Antarctica. A wealthy, I believe probably Bitcoin entrepreneur, spent several $100,000 to send a team to Antarctica to see the 24-hour sun.
Got to see that ice wall, right?
You said, but they saw the 24-hour sun. And I even wrote to the guy when he started doing this. I said, look, I don't care how much you spend. You can spend millions of dollars. You can send every flat earther you can find down there, and they'll come back, and then they'll start picking holes in what they saw. They'll say, well, yeah, we did see a 24-hour sun, but that's because of the sun simulator. I mean, anybody who's rich enough to send us to Antarctica could make a sun simulator.
Yeah, there's always a justification.
There's always a justification. But anyway, the topic of flat eartherism came up in one of our episodes. We did not have a guest in that episode, but we talked about it quite a while, and it was an entertaining conversation.
Yes, this is, we got just about 19 minutes out of this. I think the whole conversation was about 45 minutes long. It is something that each of us has very strong feelings about. It is definitely one of the ones that we got into pretty deep.
Well, I've had, I think, 3 guests on Trailer Trash Terrors who are flat earthers.
I must have missed some episodes. I thought you just had one.
No, I had Keith Hudson, who's the professional poker player flat earther.
Okay.
And then I had, I don't know, I can't remember. Sorry, I don't remember your name. But a fellow from Washington who was very nice, very pleasant to talk to. Oh, that's right. The third guy kept jacking me around. He's not come on yet. His name is Tom Fifield. He's in Australia. And he's a very, very unusual fellow. I believe I can say that without fear of getting any lawsuits. Very unusual fellow. I just find the whole idea of how people's minds work to be pretty fascinating, extremely fascinating. And of course, there's always the Poe problem. You know, am I dealing with someone who really believes what they say, or am I dealing with someone who's just pretending to believe what they say?
Right. Yep, and we do. We talk about this in here, the different types of flat earthers that there are. So this is a good conversation. Enjoy.
Flat eartherism.
Let's talk about flat eartherism. But see, guys, you don't know the reason why I say that, and I'm ashamed to say it. I have people in my own family that have all of a sudden fell prey to this crazy nonsense idea that the earth is flat.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
How many of them took a high school or junior high school physics course?
Every one of them.
Wow.
And I can tell them or look at them and say, we have satellites up in space now, correct? And they'll say, yes. And you can see all the other planets. What do they look like? Well, they're round.
They look like spheres.
I said, what does Earth look like? Well, it looks round, but it may be flat. I'm like, has everybody lost their blooming mind these days?
Okay, but Father Mike, what you're missing here is they actually don't look round. They look like circles.
Well, true.
They give the appearance with shading of being round, but that's a facade.
Well, now you're sounding like them.
All right. So the main question the one has to ask, because as far as I know, there are no flat earthers in my family. Every other kind of weirdness you can imagine.
I'm ashamed to say it. I'm like, well, they're not on my side. They're on Sonny's side, so it's okay. Thank God she's laying down right now.
JJ, any flat earthers in your family?
I'm sure.
My family is filled with rapists and axe murderers, but to my knowledge, we don't have one flat earther. I don't know whether that is to our credit or not.
You almost sounded like Alice's restaurant there for a minute there, JJ. Mother rapers, father rapers.
Father stabbers. Dave, what about you?
No flat earthers in my family that I'm aware of, but I do find the whole topic fascinating.
But
you and I have talked about it a bunch.
This is 2023, man. Come on. Really?
Well, I got to tell you, if you go out and look at some of these websites and you look at some of the posts out on X, right, formerly known as Twitter, there are some interesting explanations for how all of this works.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Well,
yes.
they're interesting if you haven't taken any kind of math beyond grade school.
I must be living with my head in the sand or something, because I'm not seeing this, man.
They have gotten to the point to where they actually have experiments you can do yourself with line of sight that supposedly explain how the Earth cannot be round.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a big scientist, right? So I don't even bother going down that road. I've just looked at him and gone, wow, these guys have really, really worked hard at this, right?
So, yes, people do work extremely hard to support their delusions.
Well, there is a Google Earth alternative that depicts the flat Earth. There are applications which go through and explain the only fantasy quality cosmology that they have come up to explain half the crap that they have. However, I think the biggest own that I've ever seen, and y'all may have seen it, is a set of videos going around where there was a group of flat earthers that sat there and purchased a $20,000 piece of equipment that was supposed to be able to detect curvature or something else.
That was a laser ring gyroscope.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to disprove that, the Earth is spherical, but instead it proved that it was. And the look of disbelief that was on their faces was just a thing of beauty. If I'm ever having a truly bad day, that's what I picture, and I know I'm going to be all right.
I can almost quote him. He said something like, if the Earth were rotating and spherical, we would have a 15 degree per hour drift. And we're not going to find that. And then later on the day, he says, we've got a 15 degree
One of the other things about the flat earthers is along with that, they don't know if gravity really exists either.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, so how are you standing on the ground? How are things falling? I mean, I'm sorry, guys. I just don't understand.
I understand it, actually. Well, I think I do.
Somebody's got to give me some concrete evidence.
Look, I think that there's 2 or 3 different types of people that believe in the flat Earth theory.
More like 5 or 6, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Well, yeah, that's fair. You've done more research on this than I have. But some people are looking for some sort of rage against the machine conspiracy to be a part of, right? I just don't want to be part of the normal. This sounds interesting. They get into it. Some, arguments are made and they're like, yeah, okay, sure. And I'll jump along with this. They are just looking for something to be a part of that is rebellious in the modern world. Mm-hmm. There's also people who are taken in on it that just don't have the education or, enough knowledge to know any better.
Mm-hmm.
And who doesn't like a good conspiracy, right? The man's out to get you. They are telling us the world is round, right, Vic? Remember or who was it that brought up the topic? The invisible they?
The invisible they, yes. Although I think JJ and I had different ideas about what that was.
But right, they think the world is round, and let's stick it to they, right? Let's stick it to them. Let's prove that they're wrong. They're just trying to pull one over on us. And then you have, you do, I think, have some true believers that they really, really, really think that this is the deal. And I think those are the ones that come up with these really creative explanations for all of the stuff that doesn't fit.
Well, as I've said it before, and I'll say it again, I think that a lot of the people that are just in it to be in it are those that are looking for something to make them feel special. What can differentiate me? And, if I believe in this, then suddenly I have a inbuilt community and I can go to town on it.
And
I can buy that.
They don't want to take the time to learn calculus and coding and
exactly. But then you also have those that are in it purely for financial gain.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Social media is driven all from engagement. And what is the most surefire way of engagement? Rage.
Mm-hmm. Well, I at one time, and I wish I had this piece of writing in front of me. I at one time broke it down into what the percentage was I thought people fell into. And I'm just going to break them down. I mean, you've got about 50% of these people are simply trolls who enjoy stirring up trouble. I'm sure that's at least 50%. You've got those people who have found out that, if I go on YouTube or Twitter or anywhere else and I start saying ridiculous things, then some people will hate me, but some people will like me. Whether they hate me or they like me, they'll give me clicks.
Right.
And, what percentage is that? I don't know. Let's say 15%. Then you've got a group of people who really are, I came up with the term I used was epistemopathy. Epistemology being the study of learning, how you learn, how you know what you know. Epistemopathy would be an illness concerning how you learn, how you know what you know. And I think probably about 20% of these people really do have a problem with putting together ideas in their mind, putting together a cohesive picture of something in their mind. So let's say that's, what would we say that? We'll say it's 20%. That gets us up to 85%. Then you have maybe 5% of people who really are, I guess I can't be much more charitable, nuts. They really are nuts. They just do not jibe with the real world. Then you've got what I think are mostly younger people who are very, very sincerely hoping that this is true. I've even seen essays from these people. This one guy wrote, he was writing to me. He said, "Look, I just want the earth to be flat." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, it's just more exciting. That's the explorer nerd part of me. I should be able to go out and explore new lands. And well, why can't you?" I mean, I guarantee you there are places in Washington State where there hasn't been a human for 500 years. Mm-hmm. There are places that you can easily go and explore. But he had this deep emotional attachment to it. He was also intellectually honest. And I'm almost certain that if you have any intellectual honesty in you, that after you go through the swamp for a while, there's that little itch in your head that's going to say, "Oh, that was silly. I need to move on to something else." And then you've got some psychopaths. People who really like damaging other people. I think
so
it's
I wonder if part of the fall off is at the Bermuda Triangle. So that's why ships disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's where that's where the okay. The new Father Birdsong theory is that the edge of the flat Earth isn't located at Antarctica. It's actually located between Cuba and Florida and southern Georgia,
Right?
and the Bahamas, and so ships head up that way, happy as they can be. Next thing you know,
They're gone.
they're gone.
Just like planes. I mean, they just fly out of the atmosphere into space all of a sudden.
Well, two things. When I was about 30, I paid a 15 or 20 pound membership fee to the Flat Earth Society in England, the original Flat Earth Society.
Okay.
And because I wanted the piece of paper to put up on my wall saying,
the map.
No, it was like,
This is a certificate. Okay.
Yeah, this is like a certificate. Victor is a genuine member of the Flat Earth Society. Now, what those guys were about was learning to argue ridiculous points. They were rhetoricians. They didn't think for 1 second that the Earth was flat. They just realized that, hey, if I can learn to argue that effectively, I can probably argue just about anything. Kind of like in I've known people in law school who, when you go into law school, you have to argue both sides of the case. JJ's done debate. You have to show up at that debate with a fully developed argument, pro and con. Okay, so this is rhetoric. I kind of respected that. Plus, it was kind of cool to have that certificate on my wall. I don't know where it is. Excuse me, it got lost in a move or something. But I don't think those guys are even around anymore. And here's the thing: it's like talking to anybody who truly believes in a conspiracy. Their facts do not matter.
Nope.
Yeah, facts do not matter at all. In fact, it seems to me like the more facts you throw at them, the harder it is they cling to that belief.
Right. Yep.
There's got to be a name for that phenomenon.
But I guarantee that there is, and it has to be Germanic in nature. With 15 consonants. But you know what? I liken the belief of hollow earth to that of flat earth. But I would feel really bad for those people that believed in both, because you would just fall through. Sorry, that was bad. But anyway, I hear hollow earth, and I've heard more than a few of the modern incarnation of Coast to Coast AM episodes on it, and it just leaves me scratching my head. And honestly, flat earth is the exact same phenomenon, just even more so.
Well, but there were better stories with the hollow earth. I mean, you had the story of Admiral Byrd flying into the Earth and being met by flying saucers and transported to the place of the inner sun.
Yeah, but I'm talking about these are the people that actually went out and they have a financial gain to actually promote this crap. Now, one of the guys who I don't even want to remember his name, went on there and started to talk about how he was funding exhibition into the hollow earth. And then the rest of his books were all about how the Nephilim control the world. And the sad part is that he was, and he claims, God only knows if he is, an engineer. And I'm like, no. You are giving those of us who happen to be proper engineers, who are in this particular field, a really, really bad name. Please shut up.
JJ, are you suggesting the Nephilim don't control the world?
Yes. Yes, I am.
All right, we're going to have a discussion.
No. The Nephilim have all become Bigfoot.
There you go.
Obviously, those are just the ones that control the world. That's their stooges that go around and do stuff for them.
All right, I'm going to go into nerd mode here for a second. All four of us are fully capable of going into nerd mode, but I'm going to do it right now. So
Josh said, I thought we were always in nerd mode.
Pretty much.
So if you really want an exercise in frustration, find a flat earther, get them to talk, and start asking them the following kind of questions. Have you ever heard of the French geodetic expedition of 1734?
No.
I think I have, but go ahead.
Okay, the idea was there was no real question among the people in the French geodetic expedition of the world being flat or round. They knew it was round. They just didn't know if it was perfectly round, perfectly spherical. There was a thought that, okay, we're rotating, so probably the Earth flattens out a little bit at the poles, gets a little bit fatter in the middle. And it does. By like 40 kilometers.
Can I interject a question real quick? Like,
yeah,
while you're on that frame of mind that you're talking about right now, you just mentioned both the poles, right? Okay, so if the Earth was flat, that would tell me a compass would not even work.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Your Honor, I rest my case. No further questions.
I rest my case.
But you forget the magic stones that are buried in the ground that actually make the compass think that it's
my God.
Come on,
man.
I'm glad somebody knows what's going on. Good job, JJ.
All right, so the French and the Italians were both participating in this. I know this is boring, but let me finish.
No.
They sent one team to South America. Kind of, it seems like around Costa Rica, that area. And they sent another team way up north, like Greenland, someplace like that. And their job was to measure 1 degree of both latitude and longitude. Okay, using thousands and thousands of triangular measurements, measuring the spherical excess. So, I mean, you realize if you take a ball, just a basketball, and you start at the very top of the basketball, and you draw a line all the way down one side, and then down another side, and connect that, you still have a triangle. All the math for triangles still works for that. But you end up with internal angles equaling greater than 180 degrees. And this is something that flat earthers don't seem to want to address. So you can go anywhere you want in the world. You can measure these huge triangles, and you will get internal angles greater than 180 degrees. And they did this in 1734 using, telescopes and tripods and chains and ropes and things like that.
Did you just try to make us math on the rundown?
Everybody just went volume just went low.
Yeah, I know. I made an error.
Yeah, this is not that kind of show, okay?
It may be that the most influential thinker for everybody who is a part of the Rundown Core and other podcasts that we do is Malachi Martin. Father Malachi Martin, possibly Bishop Malachi Martin, possibly Cardinal Malachi Martin.
That's right.
Truth is, I'm relatively certain that he was a bishop. And I would not at all be surprised if he was a cardinal. But look, there's no more fascinating person in the entire paranormal world over the last 50 years than Malachi Martin. And just first off, the volume of what he had to say, the main book that people go back to, Hostage to the Devil, the things he had to say concerning the corruption in the Vatican. Look, it's a whole education in itself.
Most definitely. And there's a ton of interviews out there. I mean, hours and hours between the Art Bell episodes and the Branson, I believe, interviews.
Jansen.
That's it. I was close. And those I've listened to a fair amount of. They're just, he is so straight up serious, confident in what he's saying. He's a great storyteller. Now, whether everything happened the way it did, with a great storyteller, maybe 70, 80%. I don't know. The fish was that big. Who knows?
I'm a little surprised, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that by this point in time, there should be some huge definitive biography of him. Somebody would have sat down and look, let's study everything we can about Malachi Martin and just create this huge biography.
Well, now, to get into a little bit to the conspiracy side of this, in order to do a definitive biography, you would have to have access to some Vatican records that proved what he did. And given the nature of some of the things that he's written, I'm pretty sure they don't want that biography written.
Boy, yeah.
Not maybe, the current Vatican.
Maybe the next pope will
perhaps
make that a little bit easier.
Perhaps.
And then, of course, that's a question. I mean, you're seeing with the, with the definitive election of Donald Trump and what's happening up in Canada right now, what's happening in Germany, the world is retreating from let's go entirely new age, let's go entirely woke. I mean, I know these are difficult words because they don't have clear meanings, but it's a cultural shift.
It is a cultural shift. And that shift, it has been fascinating to see how much the church, and by church, I mean the Roman Catholic Church, and the governments in the West have sort of mirrored each other in terms of moving in a progressive agenda. And so you got to wonder if the governments pull back, if that culture changes, does the church become more conservative as well? That'll be interesting to see.
It's slower. So, all right, let's listen to Malachi Martin, or our discussion of Malachi Martin.
But getting back to Father Martin himself, he is a very controversial figure, not only because he left the Jesuits and wrote this very illuminating book, but he also wrote some other much more controversial books, I would say, such as The House of Leaves. And that one is all about how the satanic has actually infiltrated into the upper echelons of the Catholic Church. It is nigh on impossible to find this book for sale anywhere. It has been, I don't know if it's been actively suppressed, but it is really hard to find it in print anymore.
Oh, I'm sure.
And this is the book that has the story. Now, I haven't read it, but I've heard it discussed.
I haven't read it either. I couldn't find it.
This is the book that has the story where he talks about a ritual of enthroning Satan in the Vatican.
Yes.
And this is what we were talking about last time, about the exorcisms becoming harder. So It was his thought. I believe I heard this on an interview that was when things became more difficult, was after that ritual was performed. Does that sound right, JJ?
Yeah, it does. You got it exactly right. And he did go on Art Bell on at least 6 different times that I'm aware of. And those are highly illuminating conversations that they had. Father Martin actually participated in profiling. He took of all of the cases that he was aware of, that his priest friends had worked on, that he had worked on, and I think he said that it was well over 700. And they tried to come up with any correlations between why certain people were targeted. And the answer was there was no correlation. It was complete, at least according to the profile, everything was completely random. And there is some hints about that within Hostage to the Devil.
Well, that's the very same reason that in the early 1900s, when was it, Josh? In 1972, that Saint or Pope Paul VI said, quote unquote, that the smoke of hell has entered the church.
And a lot of that has been fueled by the second Vatican Council and radical changes to Mass, taking it out from Latin, putting it into native languages, allowing different regions to have their own culturally significant ways of expressing religion. Now, that piece of it, I think, is absolutely right. I mean that should be allowed. Whether it should be been taken out of Latin or not, that I can't really tell you. I'll let other Catholic scholars debate that one till the cows come home.
Well, that's not worth for me to debate.
Have you guys?
I mean, it's just.
Have you guys heard the Bernard Jansen interviews?
I have.
No.
They're actually, in many ways, better than the Art Bell interviews.
They are fascinating.
And one of the reasons, I think, is that he was talking to a much smaller audience. And I think when he was talking to Bell, there was a certain desire on his part to be entertaining.
And, that's true.
And when he's talking to Jansen, it's very much like a teacher talking to a bright student.
Yeah, that is about that tone.
Yeah, that's very much what it's like.
There's 22 of them that you can find. I don't know where else you can find them. I've listened to them on the Wayback Machine, the webarchive.org, and I went to the website that they reference, and it does not carry them anymore. So you can only find these on the Wayback Machine for that website. But I don't know if they're anywhere else or not. But I've listened to about 7 or 8 of them. And what I find interesting about it, I mean, yeah, all the Exorcist stuff is interesting. I think at this point, not a lot of that is new from other stuff that I've heard or read, but all of the inside politics in the church is fascinating, and predictions about what was going to happen and why and what should have happened. That stuff is really fascinating that's in there.
I can imagine. I will have to go dig those out.
Okay, so we are now stepping into episode 13, and our guest in this episode was Canon Father Dr. Robert Wills, Father Bob. And he was Father Mike's mentor in the Charismatic Episcopal Church. And boy, what a great conversation we had with him. It's so interesting to see someone who has such a religious life and faith, who is also willing to talk about the paranormal aspect of things without judging it, without, just as if it's just another conversation to be had on a Tuesday. And I really enjoyed that. This first cut, though, out of that conversation is him talking a great deal about his experience, and what we were sort of getting at is paranormal guidance from God. How does God speak to prophets? How does God get his message across? And boy, Father Bob had some really incredible experiences that were a lot of fun to listen to.
Yes, Father Bob is very senior, of course, in the CEC. But the way that his mind works is genuinely fascinating in terms of he doesn't seem to want to rule out any of the paranormal topics in terms of them being a part of the reality of the world.
Right.
So let's get to Father Bob.
What's interesting to me in this, in thinking about it, not focusing on the sight, I get what you're saying about actually seeing God, but having Jesus here, the apostles are able to directly interact with him, question and answer, have long conversations, walk down the street, see how he interacts with other people. That's much deeper than a prayer life, right? That's much deeper than anything like that. But it makes me wonder what it's like for a prophet and the prophets of old. What was their interaction with God like? Was it like a conversation with God, or was it like you see, and I'm not drawing a direct correlation, but is it like what you get with a psychic or a medium, where you get impressions, you get maybe a vision in your head, you maybe hear something, you maybe hear someone talk to you, or mentally get something projected in? I wonder what that's like for the old school prophets that's how you communed with God back then, right? That was the prophets were the way you heard God's will.
That's the way we commune with God today. We still do that. We still have that happen to us. But it's different than seeing God face to face.
Give me an example of a modern day prophet like that. When I compare it to something like, pre-Christ prophets that had visions and were looked upon. But who would be a current one?
Well, many people in my extended family would say Joseph Smith.
Yes, they would. You're correct.
I had a case where that happened to me. I was in Israel in 1995, and it was a very hot day, about 98 degrees. There weren't a lot of people that were walking around the city of Capernaum because it was so hot, and it was around noon, right about the middle of the day, the hottest part of the day. And most of the people went back to the bus, but I felt drawn to go back to the synagogue in Capernaum. That's where Christ ministered a lot during his ministry. And when I came into the synagogue, there was no one else around, and it was like a fog suddenly rolled in. It just got very foggy, where I could not see very well. I mean, it was a dense fog. And now whether it was in my mind, probably was, or audible, I'm not sure, but God spoke to me about certain things. He said, as the cities of Chorazin, Capernaum, and Bethsaida are desolate today, so are the churches in the denomination that I was a part of. He called out that denomination. I won't say that over the air, but he said, so are the churches of that denomination. And he said to me, when you get back, you will meet the man that will answer all of your questions. He will lead you in the right direction. Follow him. And then God gave me a couple of scriptures. I believe it was God speaking to me. Now, the fog lifted, and I went back to the bus. I actually ran all the way back to the bus because I was the last one there. Everybody else was on the bus, and they were wanting to go and eat lunch. So I ran all the way back. I got on the bus, and this one guy, he was from the Latter-day Saints religion. He looked over at me, and he said, you shouldn't be running in this heat. And somebody else said, he's not even sweating. He hadn't even broke out of sweat. And I was not out of breath, and I hadn't sweated or anything. I mean, it was a strange experience. But that's, you said, what is an experience where you commune with God? Well, I believe that was a case where I communed with God. God gave me some specific instructions. When I got back, I was working for a small TV station at the time. When I got back, a man came to me and said, we'd like our patriarch, we'd like you to run a spot saying our patriarch is going to be at our church this weekend. And I said, well, I don't know anything about your group or who this patriarch is, but invite him to come down and we'll do a 3-minute interview on the noon show. No pre-prepared questions. I'll ask him some things, and we'll find out if he's a quack or if he's real. The next week, this man named Archbishop Adler came to our TV station, and I asked him some very hard questions. My wife was doing the main camera work at the time because the cameraman had got sick and had to leave suddenly, so my wife had to take over and run the video. And that night when we got home, she looked at me and said, that man just answered all your questions. You know what that means, don't you? And that's the reason I'm a priest in the International Communion of the Charismatic Episcopal Church. I had no choice. I had to do what God told me. Now, you can think I'm crazy or something like that. I'm fully convinced that actually happened to me.
I don't doubt it. What a great experience.
I have no reason at all to doubt what you said.
I've had that happen to me on 2 or 3 occasions in my life. The first was when I was born. I was premature, and my lungs were not fully developed. They put me in an incubator. This was in 1950 at Little Company of Mary Hospital, Evergreen Park, Illinois. It was a Roman Catholic hospital. The nun that was there in the natal care area sent for a priest. The priest came to do last rites over me because I was dying. I was not able to breathe. As soon as the oil touched my head, my lungs fully expanded and developed, and I started breathing normally. And the doctors were totally shocked. They took me out of the incubator quickly. My father was standing there watching this through the glass partition. And when the priest came out, he said to the priest, do you think my son's going to live and going to make it? And the priest said, oh, yeah, he's okay now. He's going to grow up and be a priest one day. And my father told me that story the day that he was at my ordination to the priesthood in 1997.
Wow.
So I've had several experiences like that in my life where I believe God spoke to me, but I didn't see God face to face. I didn't really see anybody, but I had direction given to my life. And again, you could say, well, was this a physical thing, a psychological thing, both? I don't know. I can't explain it. It's a paranormal experience. That's what we're talking about, right? Paranormal experiences. Absolutely. What I wanted to say, though, David, is that this does happen. People have these types of experiences. Father Mike referred to Bishop Chuck Jones. He's had many experiences like that in his life. we were at a meeting one time where he was praying for a man in my church, and he looked at me and he said, "This man has a spirit of death on him. He's going to die if you don't get him immediate medical care." He had no insurance. He had no transportation, no insurance, no doctor, nothing. Never had any kind of health care. I arranged for him to go to a place in Columbus, Georgia called Mercy Med, where they charge only $30 and they basically do whatever they have to do. And I took him down there. They sent him immediately to the hospital, and he was hospitalized immediately with a major infection. They said if I hadn't brought him to the hospital that day, he might have died within 3 days. So that was another example of where God was speaking to someone. He spoke to Chuck Jones, and Chuck Jones told me, and then I had to act on what they said.
And I was there for all of this, by the way, guys.
Yeah, Father Mike heard that, and he knows the man I'm talking about. This man had AFib, major heart problems. Right now, his heart is actually functioning pretty much normal at better than it has ever in his entire life. But it took several years of medical care and prayer and both, to bring him to this point.
Well, I guess that, when I think about the encounter you described, and you said it was Capernaum,
yes.
When I think about that encounter, I think, well, maybe that's what the prophets experienced. When I think of somebody having an experience, an occasional experience like that in their life, that's one thing, right? Those are beautiful and wonderful experiences. But the prophets, like of old, had continual interactions with God. They were giving guidance based on them. And so I wonder, is it more experiences of that, or do they somehow experience it differently because of that frequent communication with God?
Well, Isaiah, for example, was an advisor to 4 different kings. And as you say, he had to get the word of the Lord for 4 different people to give them guidance and direction. Sometimes they didn't take it, sometimes they did. But now why he was continually given these revelations, we can't explain that. Why do some people have experiences with God and other people don't?
Right.
See, there's a lot of things we can't explain, we can't really understand. In my case, every time I've had an experience with God, it's because I've been seeking something or at a crucial point in my life where I needed some kind of direction of where to go. I had another experience like that when I moved to Georgia. I graduated from the University of Illinois. I applied at 558 different schools to get a teaching job, mostly around the Midwest, and I couldn't get a job anywhere. That was, the state of Illinois had given out scholarships to anyone that would go into teaching. They gave out several thousand scholarships, and it flooded the market because they all graduated at about the same time. And I had no idea what to do. I was at a point where I didn't know what to do in my life, or at this, Then things went from bad to worse because I had 3 car wrecks within a year and a half where I totaled out 3 cars, and none of them were my fault. I was stopped at a red light one time behind a dump truck and a bus, and the dump truck decided to back up and backed me up into the bus. The second one, I was driving on the expressway in a blinding snowstorm and started skidding sideways down the road, and this other guy and I went around and around each other, and we both stopped. And he looked at me and went, and I looked at him and I went, and then a truck came sideways down the road and hit us both. So that was, and then the third one, I was at a red light turning into a school where I was going to have a substitute teaching job. And a guy who was totally intoxicated, he ran into me from behind, knocked me in through a crowd of kids. No wonder I didn't kill about half a dozen people. Nobody got injured, into a utility pole. And there was not anything left of my car at that point. I had to crawl out through the back of the hatchback to get out of the car. The roof had caved in. All the glass was out of the car. It was pancaked. And so I was at a point I didn't know what to do. I went with a group of friends to an Assembly of God church to a youth meeting, and a man that I never had met before, he was a couple years older than me, looked at me and said, you're not willing to go where God wants you to go. As soon as you're willing to go where God wants you to go, you'll have the job you're looking for. I was like, okay. So I said to God, all right, I'm willing to go where you want me to go. That's a Wednesday night. Thursday, I get 3 phone calls from the state of Georgia offering me a job. 3 different places, Cartersville, Baxley, and Thomaston. And so I was being facetious with God, and I said, okay, God, I guess you want me to go to Georgia, but now you got to get me there. I got no car. I got no money. What am I going to do? The next day, on Friday, a man calls me from a car dealership, and he says, I understand you've had a wreck recently. We'd like you to come and look at what we have and, buy another car from us, that kind of thing. So I said, well, unless I could put about $20 down and drive the car away immediately, that's not going to happen, because I said I don't have any money right now. My insurance settlement hasn't come through yet, and I need to go to Georgia. The guy said, well, we have a showroom model here that has a little mileage on it that we could let you pick up today and probably give it to you for about $40 down. So I walked 2.5 miles to the car dealership, gave him my last $40 and bought the car. And on the way home, I realized I needed to get gas for the car. I needed a bunch of things. I didn't have but about $2 and some change in my billfold left, and no money in my bank account. So I stopped at a place and bought 2 lottery tickets, a pick 3 and a pick 4. I won both of them. I won $40 out of the pick 4 and $20 out of the pick 3. That was $60. Now, this is when gas was less than $1 a gallon. Okay.
Right.
And that got me to Georgia and back.
Enough to get you to Georgia.
I got a motel room for the night I was in Georgia for, I think, $12 or something like that. $12 or $13. Okay. I took some food with me to eat on the way, because I couldn't do it at restaurants. I couldn't find, I didn't want to go as far as Baxley, Georgia. I had no idea where that was. The Cartersville job I didn't take because it was only a temporary thing. A woman was pregnant, and it was for the duration of her pregnancy. So I came to Thomaston, and that's where I ended up. That's where Father Mike lives now. And it's 18 miles from where I live. And that's how I got to Georgia. So again, that was a paranormal experience, you might say. Okay. But that's how I ended up where I am today. Now, it's a bizarre set of circumstances. What I'm saying, David, is maybe the prophets had these kind of needs that God would speak to them, or God would do things in their lives to help them meet the need that was there now, and in maybe not just in their lives, but in the life of the nation, or in the life of the king.
Interesting. Now, when you got to Georgia, did God help clear your insurance record?
eventually I did get it straightened out, and we got the insurance money, and I paid for the car. Yeah, but it took a few weeks.
Because 3 accidents in a row, I don't know if State Farm would still cover you after that.
Oh, they didn't have no fault insurance in those days, so it actually took me close to 2 months before I got the insurance settlement and got everything sorted out. Yeah.
Well, the question I have in that whole story is, who was the person that said, as soon as you go where God wants you to be, you'll have the job you need? Who was that?
Yeah, it was some guy at this church. I don't know. It was just a young guy, maybe a couple years older than me. He wasn't a clergy or anybody like that. He was just, we were all just in a group praying for one another and praying in the Spirit. And he spoke that over me. I don't know how he knew that I needed a job. I guess God must have shown him.
Well, there are a lot of stories, though, of people encountering others who seem to have something amazing and important to say to them right at that moment.
Yeah.
That they could not know. I don't know what that is.
And they're never seen again.
And they're never seen again. And to me, that feels like
a gift of the Spirit.
Yeah.
It's called the word of knowledge. The Bible talks about that. It's called a word of knowledge. There's a word of knowledge, a word of wisdom, discerning spirits. There are different gifts of the Spirit that people receive, and it's through the Holy Spirit working in their lives that they get this knowledge. We don't understand how it works exactly. It just does. It's not uncommon in Pentecostal and charismatic circles to see this kind of thing. Now, some of it, you got to be careful, because some of this is hyped and false, and, people will say things that aren't from the Spirit. But then you have other cases where obviously this person had this knowledge and passed it on, and then it's set into motion, a whole chain of events.
What about the idea that, the first thing that popped into my mind, and this is from, I'm sure, way too many television shows and movies, but what about some sort of like an angel taking human form and feeding you the little bit of information you need? Does that ever happen?
I don't know. I don't see anything prohibiting it from happening. But I don't know.
But how would you know? See, we would not know if it was an angelic being, No,
you'd never know.
This could have been, in my case, it could have been an angelic being. I would have never known.
I think it goes along with also the same principle to where even Elijah or Jeremiah or Samuel would speak the word of the Lord to anyone. The scripture reminds us that the Spirit of the Lord came upon them, right? And so I don't doubt that any whatsoever, that there's times to where the Spirit of God will come upon someone however he chooses. I mean, he's divine, he's all sovereign, it's his choice. But the word will come upon someone and they will speak what needs to be spoken at that specific time.
Okay, our next clip has to do with the ability of the human mind to change reality in multiple ways. First, we're going to talk about Father Mike perceiving a demon face in the wood grain pattern of a home in which he was living. And we have a few other examples of things like that.
The topic was thoughtographic phenomena.
Aha.
And so Father Mike has this experience where this demonic face shows up in the wood pattern in a panel in the house they were living in.
Oh.
And they go and they deal with it, and it goes away after they deal with it. So it's a very interesting.
So
and then
the wood grain changed?
Whatever. So this is an interesting question, and we actually didn't talk about this during the conversation, but he and his wife both saw clearly a Baphomet type face in this wood grain.
So Sonia saw this too.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, instantly recognized it. And then once the blessing was done, the face is gone. They don't see it. So now the question is that did the grain itself, the pattern itself change? Did their mental impression of the pattern change? Was the demonic altering the way they were thinking about it?
Okay.
Of anybody who would look at it?
Mm-hmm.
Or, as some exorcists have discussed, the demons can alter light. They have very good control of light. And so sometimes what you see as something that may seem extraordinary is really just a play of light where they have tweaked it to make it appear a certain way.
Okay, so the Baphomet doesn't change. Nothing changes in your mind. All that's changing is the behavior of the light involved in the situation.
Right. So they take something that is 2 knots and a little bit of a stain or whatever, and then they're twisting the light as it hits and reflects off of that and turning it into that Baphomet face.
Is there any verifiable evidence for this?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I'm not aware of either. So,
and you
but it's something that's even,
how would you even verify?
Yeah, see, the thing is, how do you verify anything that depends upon subjective perception? You know, now,
well, that might not be subjective.
If you could have a camera, you know, that can somehow see this light manipulation.
What you would have to see, you would have to be using some type of, extremely high resolution, full spectrum camera, looking at multiple angles, and you would see the light reflection off of it change. You take a picture, the face is there. You take another picture, it's not. It's so hard to prove in a non-laboratory setting. And furthermore, in the end, the question would be, well, was it the light being twisted as it was reflecting off of that surface, or was there something physically there?
Mm-hmm.
Right, that was reflecting the light instead of the wall, that was partially see-through. These are the things that keep us up at night.
These are the things that keep us up at night.
So anyway, that's and then we have we get into a whole bunch of other phenomena around altering things with your mind in terms of appearance.
Did I talk about me making the coin disappear?
Not in this. You've told that story. That was...
I think I've told it twice.
Yep.
I think I've told it twice.
I don't remember.
But it's entertaining.
Are you thinking that's a thoughtographic thing?
No. It's me changing. It's look, it's one of two things. Either it was little Victor's mind changing reality, or little Victor having a hallucination.
Yeah, except that you weren't the only one that saw it.
Yeah, right. I wasn't the only one who saw it. It was
so
a group.
That means you would have had a...
It was a group hallucination.
Group hallucination.
Yeah, and it was certainly not something that I would have faked, because I so much wanted it to happen. There was not going to be any faking of that.
This is one of the things that we have discussed multiple times in the rundown on multiple episodes is how the mind affects reality. And I don't know. My money's on little Victor changed the world that day. But let's get into this and see what Father Mike has to say.
Even though that was a story, there are real-world incidents like this where these images have shown up. And the one I'm thinking about is in Italy, I think. And I can even see the images in my mind. I just can't come up with where that is. But these images suddenly show up on their kitchen floor, and they've done everything they can over a number of years to get rid of these. But they're still there. So that's a not too terrible intro.
I got a story to tell about something like that.
Great.
I remember when Josh was probably 4 or 5 maybe. And we lived, Father Bob, that's when we lived out on Peachtree Street out there by close to Dave and Nancy's house. And he was plagued, plagued with nightmares. He refused to go to sleep every night. And to the point where Daddy would get angry with him. Dadgum, it's time to go to bed. I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to go to sleep. Or come in here and sleep with me. And I'm like, my God, what in the world is going on? And then, so I was just in my room doing some study one night on the computer and doing some prayer and stuff like that. And I walked out into the hallway in the house that it was an old house that had the old dark paneling in it. And right beside his room, where it leaded into his doorway, was the demon face that had the horns coming out of the top of the head that looked like a goat or whatever.
Baphomet.
Y'all know what I'm talking? Yeah,
Baphomet. You're talking about Baphomet.
Yeah. And I'm like, what is that? And I tried to reason it away. I'd turn around and look back. No, it's still there. And I called my wife in there. I said, what is that right there? She said, that's a demon face. I said, yeah.
What was the face made from?
It was in the wood. It just
okay. Mm-hmm.
It was in the paneling. I mean, it was just the way the paneling was. My sensibility would be that's just the way the paneling was made, but it was unmistakable. And so I had the house blessed. And another thing which nobody really understood why I was having it blessed. And except a couple, but one person that didn't know anything about it was there for it to support this house blessing, so to speak. One thing that we do, Father Bob does it as well, but when we bless a home, we bless the outside of the home as well, in the property. And someone walked by the old well, and they just stopped, and they went white as a sheet. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And they said, there's been sacrifices made in this well.
Oh.
And so we dealt with that as well. But at any rate, to make a long story short, I don't discount anything about that because I've seen it in real life. This image was on the wall, which was prohibiting Josh from having any peace in his life.
Well, did the blessing resolve that image? Did it help with it?
Yes, it did. The image faded. Right after that into something that I couldn't pick it out anymore.
The Baphomet face anymore.
I could not discern it anymore. Exactly right.
Okay. That's good. Well, the faces that I was talking about, the original faces, were called the Belmez faces, and they're in Spain. And I mean, I've essentially told the story. They appear on the floor, and no matter what they do, these faces return. So, obviously, a hard skeptic is simply going to say, look, there's some... Either they're put there falsely, like many people assume and claim that Padre Pio did, as far as his stigmata go, or there's simply some chemical process going on here that you don't understand. And I'm not hostile to that view. I just find the whole thing interesting.
So, Vic, what was the story around why those faces were there?
Well,
on the floor?
It's I don't really know. It's just I'm aware that around 1971 these faces started appearing. Let's see, located at the Pereira family home at Calariel 5, Belmez de Moraleda, Jean, Andalusia, Spain. Man, that's a long address. The Belmez faces have been responsible for bringing large numbers of sightseers to Belmez. Various faces have supposedly appeared and disappeared at irregular intervals since 1971 and have been frequently photographed by the local newspapers and curious visitors. Many Belmez residents believe that the faces were not made by human hands. Some paranormal investigators believe that it is a thoughtographic phenomenon. Now, that's a good topic, something to talk about there. Subconsciously produced by the deceased former owner of the house, Mary Gomez Camara. Skeptical researchers have performed extensive tests on the faces and believe that they are fabrications, possibly created as part of a hoax. Well, yes, of course. It is suspected that the Pereira family may have perpetrated the hoax for financial gain.
Okay. Well, now, here's why I picked the topic, or suggested the topic. When I was a teenager, I took Shaolin Kung Fu for somewhere between 5 and 6 years. And one of the stories that I remember being told was of a Shaolin monk going up to a cave and meditating for so long that he left an impression on the cave wall. Now, I've looked it up. It is not the image that I remember, but there is the legend of Bodhidharma and his shadow impressed in the Shaolin cave. Now, he's the one who brought some of the Zen Buddhist practices that the Shaolin monk practices today to them from India, I believe. But supposedly he went up to this cave for 9 years and stared at this wall, meditating, and left a shadow impression of him on the wall from focusing for that long of a period. Now, I remember seeing an image when I was younger that was like of a faded, like an old, thin man with a beard. But it's not what I see here. So I don't know if I'm mixing two different legends, but that was a thing, right? Meditate in a cave, focus on the wall so intently for years that you leave a literal piece of yourself on it, an impression of it.
That's pretty awesome. I
It's
like
pretty
that
cool.
story. Father Bobby,
Apparently you can go there today.
Father Bobby, you got anything to say about that part?
No, I've heard those stories from my martial arts training also. There's been a couple of different versions of that, as you said. Mm-hmm. And I don't discount that. I mean...
Well, the only reason I asked is since you got so much history with martial arts, I thought you might have something to throw in there.
Well, so we talked in I think our last episode, no, episode before the last, the one with Chris and Dean, about quantum physics and affecting it through thought. You know, 9 years is a long time to focus on one single thing. And if you can do a test with a quantum number generator where you sit down in a room and everybody focuses on odd numbers instead of even numbers, and it starts spitting out more odd numbers than even, and that's just in a very short time frame with a very few people. Think about the intensity of focus that a true practitioner of Zen Buddhism does over 9 years. That deep, deep focused thought. You could do all potentially take that to a much, much grander scale than just spit out some odd numbers or even numbers. So it seems to me like the physics might support something like that, but I don't know.
Does anybody remember a guy named Ted Serios? Okay.
No, but I'm guessing he was no joke.
Guessing he was what now?
No joke. Serious? Siri.
That's a good joke. I like
Come on, man. That was a good one.
That was a good one.
Oh, you're right. Give one to Dave. Take some, give me some demerits. It just...
Me too.
it just didn't work at all. I saw JJ over there kind of laughing, going, man, I've missed something, and I don't know what.
I'm glad you got it, JJ. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, I appreciate a good dad joke. That was good stuff, man.
So, psychic investigators sometimes are doing very serious investigation, but both people who investigate supposed psychic events and scientists are fairly easily fooled. I mean, James Randi has shown this over and over and over again. He can get a group of scientists together and very easily fool them as to what they're seeing. Okay, so Ted Serios was a guy who had what he called the gadget. And it was like a little thing that he'd hold up to his eye. Okay, and this guy was either a long-term alcoholic or a long-term drug user. He was very weird. But he'd take his little gadget and he'd hold it up to his eye like this, and he'd ask somebody to bring a camera up close to the gadget, and then he'd do kind of a little mumbo-jumbo, and he'd go, "Rawr!" or something like that, with the gadget. And the idea was that he was projecting a photograph onto the film in the camera. And frequently, they would develop the film, and there would be photographs on there of things other than Ted Serios holding this little gadget thing. So there'd be a tower in Venice, or there would be some mountain scene somewhere, and he said that's what he was projecting. And I have never, ever found a definitive explanation of what he was doing, of whether he was just a complete fraud, if he was actually doing something. But to me, that seems to be if he was genuine, that's a thought-generated image.
I have heard of photography, psychic photography like that before. Yeah, you got to wonder, what is the method? And then how would that work with digital?
How would that work with a digital camera?
Could you do it with a digital camera? It would be almost like thought-generated EVPs, which we talked about before too. So the idea that that an EVP could potentially be the projection of the person capturing the EVP.
Yeah,
because I don't know if that was in your show or not.
Yes, that's a thought I've always had, and it mainly came from Father Birdsong's that EVP, where the EVP predicts what Father Birdsong is going to say. Okay, so silence, and there's this very machine-like wow, and then a second and a half later, Father Birdsong says wow. And it's not the same voice, and it's not the same cadence. It's not Zoom getting out of sync.
Well, the one that freaked me out the most was the one that was a female voice, and then I spoke. Okay, that was unmistakable. I mean, even the greatest skeptic in the world could not have thrown that one down.
All right, I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so this image right here, This is Ted Serios. You can see the look on his face. You can see how much he's concentrating. He's got his little gadget in his hand, and he's using a Polaroid camera. And so you got a lot of pictures like this, of Ted doing his little gadget focus thing. Focus face. But then you got some pictures like this.
Boy, that looks an awful lot like a hotel in Tampa.
It sure does. It looks like a hotel in Galveston too. And then
I have a really hard time.
Very hard time with this.
Not already on the film.
Well, or he's got a piece of film in his gadget that he's reflecting light off of or something. So I suppose it'd probably work with a digital camera if you could get the light into the camera.
Yeah, those are really,
But this is a very strange thing, and this is one of those things. Okay, here's the gadget. Here we go. Yeah, see, there's the... Oh, is that the gadget? Yeah, that's the gadget. This is one of those things where the story has stuck around now since... Gosh, I think he was doing this back in the 70s. And it's never been specifically or categorically disproven.
Debunked, yeah.
Nor has it ever been categorically proven. For some reason, the high school library that I went to, whoever bought books loved paranormal books. And we had gobs and gobs of them in there. Probably why I'm so weird today. But I would read every single one of them. And I remember reading this book specifically, written by a guy named Eisenbud, who was a doctor, who very, very definitely believed that Ted Serios was doing something like that.
Yeah, and unless you had the equipment that he used to create it, I don't know if you would... It would be so hard to disprove or prove one way or another. But, boy, I mean, that really... I could see psychic images maybe showing up on film that were kind of a blur or an impression. These are very, very detailed. All right, our next guest is Jessica. This is Father Mike's daughter. And we had a wonderful discussion with her. She was such an easy guest. She was great to talk with, very relaxed, really enjoyed just a conversation. And we got into, at the beginning, before we really got into, talking with her about a bunch of stuff, we did get into a Dead Sea Scrolls conversation. I had asked JJ a question about it, and he gives some detail about what they are, the perspective on them. And that led into a question about the Nephilim and the Days of Trouble. Now, this had to do with a prayer that was in the Dead Sea Scrolls that he was reading. And it is, this whole idea of Nephilim is fascinating. You got people out there that think that, well, maybe the Nephilim are what's possessing people as opposed to fallen angels and so on. I bring that up. But if what this is talking about is true, then they would be restricted to 4 days out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the days of trouble, one for each quarter of the year, I guess, basically. And I don't know, could be a thing.
Good day to call in.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see what JJ's got to say about that. JJ, I'm looking at just the Wikipedia on here. It says there's 981 texts of the Dead Sea Scrolls. As this is essentially somebody's library, right? I mean, that's the way we look at this. This is a collection of books that can span from serious religious theologic texts to prayers to ways to live. I mean, it runs the gamut in terms of content, right?
It does. Well, you don't really find too many like practical pieces or non-religious text in there. But yeah, I mean, it is their library, and they would only usually devote a lot of effort into the writings that were extremely important. So that's why the majority of it is either the Hebrew text, the Hebrew Bible, or the text in which they consider canonical, or the most important prayers. And before I shut up, there is one prayer that is my favorite. It is 4Q 510 and 11, meaning that was found in the fourth
I remember
cave.
that one.
Yeah, it goes essentially, Ani Mashkil, and I, the instructor, am making a proclamation of his glorious splendor, meaning God's, in order to instill dread and to terrify all of the spirits of the angels of destruction, meaning the Watchers, the spirits of the bastards, meaning the Nephilim, spirits of the demons, Lilith, howlers, desert dwellers, and those who suddenly strike in suddenness to lead astray an established spirit and to charm hearts. Meaning that nobody is safe. And there's an entire concept that's been hypothesized about time itself being a temple, and because they would have a solar calendar, a day with the inaccurate time measurements they had would equal to 364 days in a year, meaning that each side of this theoretical temporal temple would have 90 days, meaning that there were 4 days left over. And these were the 4 days of trouble in which these spirits of the Watchers and the Nephilim and every other bad thing that came out of the desert Duda-El could inflict very, rigorous harm upon the community itself.
Okay, so that raises a question. We just recently talked about the whole deal in Miami for Trailer Trash Terrors. We did that discussion on the Nephilim and the aliens and whatever may have happened there. But somebody made a comment on one of the videos that I saw that, well, this could only happen to be the Nephilim if it was one of those days of, what did you call it, a day of terror?
Day of trouble.
A day of trouble. And that's the only way it could have happened to be the Nephilim, because the Nephilim are bound except for on those days. Is that from I know you've read the pseudepigrapha and the other books much more than I have in terms of, because they're not mentioned in the Bible very much. So does that fit with that? Are the Nephilim tend to be bound to, not be able to interact with the world except for on those days? Or is this the only place that's really talked about?
So that idea of the Nephilim, really all of Genesis 6, they are the primary subject matters of most of the book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees. So that's where those ideas primarily come from. And it's pretty much Enoch in which is the source material for a lot of this stuff. And according to the book of Enoch, the spirits of the Nephilim, because they were such abominations in that they were the abhorrent mixture of spirit and flesh, that even after Gabriel sent them into battle against one another and they all killed themselves, they couldn't die. So their spirits are still out there in the ether somewhere, floating around. And at least there is an idea that only on the days of trouble could these various spirits do any harm. But you'd essentially have to take First Enoch to be a holy book again in order to even consider that, because the entire idea is apostrophe to every other major organized religion.
So there are other perspectives in which the Nephilim could be free and creating havoc, not bound just to those 4 days.
Well, to every other religion, the Nephilim once existed and they no longer are. It's really only in First Enoch and Jubilees do they provide a reason why. It kind of explains what Genesis 6 truly is. And it's Enoch that gives the idea that they are still around in the ether somewhere.
Because I don't know where I've heard this, but I have also heard a perspective where the Nephilim are, because they're dead and they were technically, they don't have human souls, or not a traditional human soul, that they are the ones that possess people versus fallen angels. And not saying I prescribe to that, but that is a theory that I've heard thrown out there, because they are these spirits that are out there. They have no place to go. And in theory, the demons have been cast down. So I don't know.
Yeah, I thoroughly do not believe in that, but can I point to something that says this is absolutely not true? No, I wouldn't even begin to.
The truth is, we haven't had that many actual ghost stories on the rundown. We've had one here and there, but Jessica had a good one. There was not only a ghost story, but it seemed to also stray into the realm of possession and the fact that those who are possessed often have very powerful negative reactions to any kind of Christian words or symbology. That affair.
In this case, it being her boyfriend at the time, now her husband, praying over her. Right. And, she was daughter of a priest, right? So she grew up very Christian.
Jessica is the kind of person who would normally appreciate someone saying a prayer of protection or an intercessory prayer or anything like that. But in this case, it did not make her happy. Not at all.
Jessica, in your entire life, have you ever had anything happen to you that you would place in the paranormal category?
Yeah. One time I was staying at my husband's house back when we were dating. And, we lived he lived kind of far away. So I stayed at his house with his parents. And I remember going into the room and I heard this shuffling noise. And I didn't know what it was. And I was like, well, is it their dog? And they kept a very clean, nice home. I was like, it's not like a rat, but it definitely was a very apparent shuffling noise. So I looked around and there was nothing there. And the dog was actually in a kennel. And I was like, that was really weird because I know for a fact I heard shuffling. So I heard it once or twice more, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And I eventually went to bed, and it had a bunk bed. And when I went to bed, I was very, very afraid.
Were you sleeping on the bottom bunk or the top bunk?
On the top, sorry. Uh-huh. And I remember being very afraid and feeling like something was watching me and was very concerned. And so I went to sleep that way eventually. And I woke up and he had gotten back and he had went into the room for something, Jonathan, my husband. And when I woke up, I had a full night terror panic attack.
Really?
And I never had one ever, but it was this gripping sense of fear that was uncontrollable. And he was like, it's me. What are you afraid of? And I was crying and hysterical. And I knew that he was there and I knew that nothing was happening, but it was just a full blown panic attack. And so he ended up wanting to pray for me because I told him what happened. And when he started praying, I got more afraid. Like I had a very bad reaction to him praying. And I actually asked him to stop.
Really?
And he was like, yeah. And he was like, no, we're not going to stop. We're going to, like, he was by that. And eventually it wore off. But I never had a panic attack. I've never had a night terror. And it was just this gripping sense of fear that I've never felt at any time in my life.
What do you think you were hearing?
I'm not sure. I mean, it felt like a spiritual thing, you know, and later on I figured out that, you know, someone in the house had been doing, you know, some weird stuff in the room. So I don't know if it was like an attachment or anything, and there was something in there. But to me, it definitely felt real. I mean, I've never had any kind of hysterics in my life. And I know that I heard something, so I don't really know what it would be.
But the actual physical evidence that you heard was really pretty mundane. I mean, it was small noises, shuffling, that kind of.
It sounded like something was in there, but I couldn't figure out what it was.
But you didn't see anything, you weren't attacked by anything. But
yeah, it was more of an emotional reaction than anything.
The mental impact it had on you was quite powerful, though.
Yeah.
The night terror feeling was when you woke up, you said in the middle of the night, that was just a feeling, that there was no like dream associated with it or anything like that?
No, it was just like immediately I was afraid again. It was like I was afraid when I went to sleep, and I was afraid when I got up, and I felt like something was in there and like something was going to harm me.
Did you have any sleep paralysis when you woke up?
No, not at all. Like I bolted right up. And I didn't understand why. And that was what was concerning, because I'm kind of a very practical, logical person. And so I was like, I don't understand why I'm having, because in my head I'm thinking, is my husband, you know, is Jonathan there? And there's nothing here. Why are you acting like this? You know? And I was very concerned when I got afraid when he started praying. I was like,
I imagine so.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know why I would have a first reaction to that, but you know, that's really my only one. He did have an experience there too, like before we met, like a year or so prior. And he felt something grab his covers off of him, like pull his covers off of him. And that was on the top bunk as well, in the same room. So, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's annoying. I used to have something flip the covers up over my feet in the middle of the night.
Really?
Yeah, just like it was walking past the bed and flip them up.
Wow.
Wake me up.
Did that happen often?
For a couple of months, yeah. Yeah, that was in a long string of events dealing with something demonic. So.
Oh, wow.
It was.
This was after your experience in the trailer.
Yeah. This was 2 years later. This is after any of the attacks had died down. It was just now occasionally annoying stuff would happen.
So our next discussion, you know, we got pretty heavy into what is a ghost, other types of entities, and then this idea of a Dybbuk came up. And so we go into different perspectives on what a Dybbuk is and what the Dybbuk box is, and the idea of ghost possession. And then that leads into a really interesting story that Jessica brings up about a case in India of possession of someone who died at the time of death. And then it, of course, always leads into the idea of reincarnation, too. We hit that a lot.
So I definitely believe in ghosts. I have encountered ghosts my entire life, and the area I grew up in is just completely rife with them, or at least some type of spirit. Have certainly felt demonic oppression before a few times in my life. I have interviewed people that have claimed to have been possessed not by a demon, but rather by a purely selfish entity which they refer to as a Dybbuk.
Oh, like the Dybbuk Box?
I thought that was just something they did for TV.
It was a Jewish folklore or something like that, right?
Okay.
Yeah, JJ, it's supposed to be the ghost of a witch, correct? The Dybbuk itself, isn't that the background of it?
I thought it was more like pent up bad energy or something, but I could be wrong.
Well, the Dybbuk box was meant to be a holder, basically a cell for a negative spirit, but I don't think it was meant to be for a demonic spirit. I think it was meant for I want to say a witch, but
what did they say the experience of being possessed by a Dybbuk was?
So this was in my interview with the demon folklorist. Mm-hmm. She was fascinating, but she said that there was a weekend in which they actually, she has no knowledge of, I think it was 48 hours of her life, and she suddenly just woke up in a hospital, and she had been accused of doing the craziest of things that she has no memory of whatsoever. And she has some pretty complex rules of how she evaluates demonic entities, especially in folklore. So I'll let you decide whether, those are valid or not, but it was interesting. And then I have also, spoken with others who have performed an exorcism on someone who claimed to have been possessed by a jinn.
Oh, wow.
So I don't mean
but they were thinking of the jinn as being an entity, another resident of the paranormal zoo.
Right.
I mean, not in the same cage. We're down here in the jinn territory. Okay. Come buy your jinn feed. But they, that's the paranormal zoo part of this, and it's hard to get through talking to. I mean, many hardcore Christians, they don't want to think about anything existing other than demons.
And sometimes they don't even want to think of that.
That's all that exists.
That's very true, Jess.
So, according to Britannica, the Dybbuk in Jewish folklore is a disembodied human spirit that, because of its sins, wanders relentlessly until it finds a haven in a body of a living person. So the Dybbuk box would be when you exorcise a Dybbuk, and this is not in the Britannica part, but my guess is when you exorcise it out, it would be to capture it and maintain it so that it can't inhabit anyone else.
It's like the Ghostbusters toaster.
Now, this is not right. That's right. Exactly. It's a Ghostbusters box. I don't know. I grew up in different Protestant churches. I don't know that they didn't believe in ghosts. I think that it wasn't talked about a lot. I've known many Protestants who have had ghost experiences and did not attribute them to the demonic. And I know that, my dad, when I spoke with him, because, we talked occasionally about the investigating I did, and he wasn't a particular fan of it. But he once gave me his opinion, and he thought that the spirits that I was interacting with, and now he was strongly Protestant, Southern Baptist, his thought was that those were the people that weren't going to heaven, that these were condemned souls, and therefore they were restless down here, which would be similar to what this is saying about the Dybbuk.
Mm-hmm.
There is, I forget the name of the movie, but there is I'm pretty sure a Polish film that depicts the possession of a person by a Dybbuk. and it all took place at a wedding. It was a rather boring movie, except for the Dybbuk piece of it. I have to look that up.
Well, and we've talked about, I can't remember which episode, we've talked about possession by human spirits before and whether that was possible or not. True. And I don't remember if that was on the rundown or ending the curse, but the idea that could a spirit possess someone? And it's a difficult one, right? I mean, my reaction was the only way I can see it easily is, if you were doing something like astral projection and you were outside of your body, then maybe that opens up an opportunity for a spirit to enter your body.
True.
But that is a very human, three-dimensional way of looking at things. And the spirit world probably doesn't work quite like that. What was that, Josh?
Or through invitation, inviting it.
True.
But I'm not even sure if that would work. Now, of course, I'm going to go on a limb and just say I don't know any of this crap for sure. I don't think anyone does unless you have a heck of a lot of mystical power that I don't know anything about, which is entirely possible. Not saying it's not, but I don't know. I have met individuals that claim that, demons are really more elemental forces, but I have never heard of anyone who has willingly said, "Oh yeah, I've been possessed by a human-based spirit before."
Would you? These are the sort of things that I I have no trouble believing that someone was possessed by something, or at least went through a psychological state, a period of time where they believed themselves to be possessed by something. Okay, both of those are completely possible states of being.
Yep.
But I have no idea how people attribute this to a particular thing, if once again it hasn't announced itself.
Even if it announced itself, would you trust it?
Which could be lying, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's a very interesting case in India of a supposed possession by another person. Yeah. And it was this woman, I think her name is Shiva, and she supposedly died. They had people tending to her. They were about to get ready to get her prepared for a burial. They had checked her pulse and it wasn't there. And I think she was dead for 40 minutes and she suddenly woke up. And when she woke up, she spoke completely differently. She was in a small village in India somewhere, and she spoke like a very educated woman. And she didn't recognize her husband, and she didn't recognize anybody. And she ended up staying with them for a long time. And a man in the city nearby heard about the story, and he was like, you know what? I'm just going to go check this out because something's off about this. And he had a daughter who had been killed. And I don't think he ever found her body. And he went and visited her, and she called him father. And he spoke to her and showed her pictures, and she recognized and could name every person in the pictures.
It was like she became a different person.
Yeah, it was like she was possessed by this dead woman who had been murdered, supposedly.
I have either heard this story or a story very
similar.
Yeah, this was actually studied by a university, and it's, people tout it as a case that, couldn't be solved because they couldn't disprove that she was a different person. And there was a lot of evidence to suggest that she was, Did
she ever have moments of time where she seemed to be the old person?
Not that I heard of, not when I heard about the story. To me, from what I heard, the family just kind of kept her out of charity, but she eventually was kind to her children, but she didn't recognize them. She told the family, you're not my family. You're not my husband.
Man, that would be rough.
This is a different one. So I've heard another story like this, but then the woman went to live with the previous family.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking about.
Yeah, so that's two
with her
different
old
stories.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe she did after she met, her quote unquote dad. But yeah, I mean, they thought it was weird because the way that she spoke, this woman had lived in this village for her whole life. And she spoke like someone who had went to college, and the dead woman had.
So the question would be, is that, well, that wouldn't be what we would think of as traditional possession, right? Because she wasn't taking over an inhabited body. She waited until
the body was vacant, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which
now, I know there's a case in the United States of a girl who agreed to share her body with the spirit of a woman who had been murdered.
I think I heard about that.
So that she could have time to be with her family and to try to solve this murder. And
I think I heard about that.
And I can't think of the name of what that is, but I can find it.
It just sounds like a Netflix movie.
It really does sound like a Netflix movie. Yeah,
it's crazy.
It really does.
But life is crazy. I mean, that is the thing. You talk about, okay, here's a woman who inhabits a deceased body and then is somewhat verified by the father by things they know, the way they talk, who they are. It's just like the reincarnation stories where someone knows a life that they possibly could, there's no way they could possibly know it.
Right, yeah.
And details from, like the one that was a pilot, the kid that, told the battle, how the plane went down, knew the plane inside and out, all this stuff.
Wow.
I mean, these things are crazy, and you do have to question what is going on. There's definitely seems to be more than just, well, there's people who are alive and there's demons. And I think that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you would test, I know.
Wait. So Dave, you're part of the binary camp, alive, demon, nothing in between.
No, I'm saying you have to think that there's more than that.
Oh, yes,
there's more than
yes,
live people and demons.
Yes, I agree.
There's got to be more.
This next clip is probably the longest clip we've ever used on the countdown, in that it's about 30 minutes long.
Yep.
Occasionally we will have a guest, somebody generally who has tremendous knowledge, who just, for whatever reason, doesn't want to use their own name. And of course, you can normally tell from the name we choose. So this guest's name that we used was Gus Frankenmeir.
If there's a real Gus Frankenmeir out there, he's going to be really upset at that.
Right. Well, no, Gus. If you are Gus Frankenmeir, write to us, and we'll invite you on the show.
Yes, we'll have Gus Frankenmeir 2 episode.
Gus Frankenmeir 2. You're probably better than the original Gus Frankenmeir.
That's pretty hard. I don't know.
Gus was somebody who I know Gus quite well, and he's one of these brilliant people who, for whatever reason, his life path just did not go through a university. Doesn't matter. He spent that time reading every book he could possibly find, and man, does he know a lot of stuff. So we talk about quantum physics, quantum mechanics, entanglement, Cern, opening portals, and are they worshiping Baphomet, the whole thing. But
there's also in the middle a theory of his about sending information back in time, which we've covered at a later episode, and another theory about that. I mean, look, this guy is taking what you can figure out with science, again, without that university education, and putting things together going, but what about this?
What about that?
Very good thinker in that perspective.
But he did bring us into a new realm, which we must call the Great Paranormal Rundown Melonhead Experiment the Melonhead Experiment to end all Melonhead experiments. And if you're listening,
I think we've got to do this again.
What, do the Melonhead Experiment?
We do. I think we have got to play around with the list and come up with a protocol and some serious experiments on trying to get specific topics to come up.
Well, you know, I've already done that to a certain degree.
Really?
I've added, what is the Xenix cards, the Zener cards? You know, it's a little squiggly thing. It's a plus. It's a star.
Oh, right.
And so I've added that too.
The Bill Murray cards.
Oh, right. Yeah, where they were. No, got it wrong.
Every
again.
time he gets it right, you go, nope.
It's the
That's
Zener.
A Ghostbusters reference for anybody.
Yeah, it's the Zener cards. Okay, it's a star, it's a squiggle, it's a plus sign, it's a circle, and it's a square. Okay, and so the idea is that the sender sits there and tries to send the image of the card to someone else, and they're supposed to write it down. When I was in an honors program in Florida when I was in high school, we got to go out to the University of South Florida and be experimented on with these Zener cards.
Cool.
And I actually kind of got a blip. I got a professor saying, you should come back. Because out of 3 sessions where we're doing like 20 Zener card sessions each, I got them perfect on one try for every session. Where I got all 5. Yeah, I got all 5 cards right. And he said, if you do it once,
odds of that are really, really high. I mean, low.
That's what he said. He said, if you did it once, that'd be fine. But you've done it 3 times in one day. And then, of course, he listened. You weren't cheating, were you? How do I cheat? No, I wasn't cheating. But I believe all those other experiments are put to shame by the Gus Frankenmeir Melonhead experiment. So let's go visit that and see what Gus had to say.
Wait, before we start, can we talk about random number generators?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. That's
breaking the rules right off the bat. I like you, Gus.
I like it, Gus.
Good start.
Do you think that thoughts can influence random number generators?
You're talking about the Princeton eggs.
Well, maybe.
Yes. Do I believe that thoughts can? Yes, I do, actually.
What about random number generators and quantum computers?
Those are the ones I'm thinking of. What is a Princeton egg?
Well, Gus, do you know? Can you talk about the Princeton eggs well?
Well, I know that there's a program that Google and a couple other companies are running that it uses random number generators and quantum computers, and they actually had to shield them from human thought.
Correct.
Which is pretty odd. It's odd behavior for a computer in general, but specifically, I guess the quantum computer has that issue.
Well, I had a conversation probably with one of these guys in the last 2 weeks about ghosts poltergeist ghosts being able to impact quantum processors in quantum computers.
You and I were talking about
that. I mean, so what you've got with the quantum computers, you've got a situation where the processor itself is contained in this highly, highly shielded room. It's shielded from everything. It's shielded from electromagnetism. Gordy Rose, the guy who runs D-Wave, says that the space where the actual processor is in a quantum computer, which really looks about like the processor in my laptop, is the coldest place in the universe.
I believe that.
Well, it has to be.
Yeah, it has to be. It's the coldest place in the universe. And it's Go ahead.
Does that mean that we can't think when there's cold? When it's too cold out?
Well, okay, but wait. There's a lot to dig into here.
Can we back up just for a little bit and talk about random number generators just in general first?
We sure can, yes.
So as a technologist and architect and developer for the past 25 plus years, I know my fair share about RNGs. RNGs, at least with dealing with typical programming languages or libraries, because almost everything is done through libraries because you never really want to reinvent the wheel. Random number generators are never truly random.
Nope.
There is always a pattern because there's always a method to be able to pick one of these numbers.
And it's important. Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Okay. It's important in the simulation world, at least, that it not be truly random. Okay, you've got to be able to make one change in that model and make sure that it's going to go through the same exact random number stream that it went through before.
Exactly.
And
you
it
have
will
to be able to track back exactly the steps that were taken.
Correct.
Which is absolutely one of the missing pieces of ingredients when it comes to LLMs or large language models with generative AI. But that's an entirely different topic. And you can attempt to seed random information, more and more random information, to make it more random in general, but you're never going to truly get random. You can just try to sow as much chaos as humanly possible to get a more randomized number. However, when it comes to quantum computing, you're dealing with qubits. And a particle you can only measure two distinct phases of a particle: the spin and its charge. No, its movement or its spin. Anyway,
you can measure its velocity or you can measure its location.
Right, and you can never pick. You can never know both. And that's.
But can't you bias both, like with electromagnetism?
Can't you what?
Repeat that question. Sorry.
Can't you bias both of those things with electromagnetism?
Well, you can pinpoint one of those two variables, but you can never know both due to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Hey, Gus, can I just jump in here 1 second? Since you seem to be, as I knew you would, just grooving right on in. We had a fantastic guest one time whose name was Sylvia Schultz. And we were kind of explaining to her what we were doing, and she says, "Oh, paranormal dork talk. Yeah, I can do that all day long."
And this is perfect paranormal dork talk.
We're on the precipice of physics, though, right now, I think.
Well, that's okay. That's well within paranormal dork talk.
We're firmly in the realm of physics right now.
Yeah, this is just fine.
But what you said, Gus, was you could bias the spin or the direction, but that's still not measuring it, though, right? You could potentially influence, is what you're saying, but you can't guarantee it, right?
But isn't measurement influence in this case on the quantum level?
Yes,
because
on the quantum level, if you are normally, like it used to be, like back when I was in school. If you ever saw a depiction of an atom, then it would have very, distinct orbits for its electrons, etc. However, in very modern pictures, those are depicted as clouds because we know the general shape of where these things could be at. But until you physically measure it, they're everywhere at once. It's the spooky distance of an action.
Right, a cloud of probability.
It's outside of time, right? And that's the difference, right?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. I'm not sure quite what you mean by that.
It's not subject to time. Like, it can be in multiple positions at the same time.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yes, it can be.
Or space. Yeah.
But it's not until you physically measure it will it become locked in one locale.
Which is why they have to shield everything.
Exactly. And the problem with qubits is suddenly you're dealing with a lot more variables than just, a binary 1 or 0. You have, several distinct different states. And so you're able to encode more information. However, because you can't truly predict every variable that's going on, it's impossible, at least according to physics as we understand it, then there are going to be random patterns that enter into any computation. And you have to be able to factor any of those outliers out. And by making things as cold as humanly possible, as close to absolute zero as we can get, then that helps to eliminate some of that variance. And in fact, we've been, at least according to these companies that create these quantum computers, they have been able to add even more qubits into the equation than was predicted upon a linear timescale.
I've been wondering what the companies who buy these computers are doing with them. What Lockheed buys. Lockheed is always one of the first companies to buy these things. Google has a full quantum computer lab now. I wonder what the work being done on those computers is.
Predictive modeling.
We probably don't want to know.
I mean, from what I hear, it's predictive models.
Predictive modeling in terms of
weather,
stock markets.
Stock markets is where I think the D-Wave stuff was originally used.
And
I think Google uses it, a couple other companies, but that's what I've heard.
Well, I'm pretty sure you're right. I am pretty sure you're right. I
thought they took emotive language and converted it to code, where the code would basically if a large group of people in a certain area used the same emotive words, that would be put into the database as a predictor of sorts. So it could predict human behavior.
Correct. Well, that gets us back to the eggs. Okay, the Princeton eggs. And I don't know how many Princeton eggs there are now.
Greetings, everyone. This is Cedric Dankworth Smythe. There are currently 70 Princeton eggs in service. They are part of what is generally known as the Global Consciousness Project. I now return you to the unprotected gang of nerds.
But there are... The last I checked, there were several hundred spread out through the world.
Vicar Manson has been on a genuine exaggeration roll tonight. We'll have to have a discussion about that.
Okay, an egg is just a small random number generator. And the truth is, I don't know if it's just a pseudo-random number generator like all other random number generators, or if it's something like an electronic circuit that's taking random data from the noise between two transistors or two resistors, or it's keying on something like atomic decay, because using those methods you actually can get genuine randomness. Like I said,
atomic decay, would that be random though? Really?
Well, once again, I mean, you're talking, if there's any pattern, it's going to play out over a couple of billion years. And so I don't know about you, Gus, but I don't think I'm going to be around in a couple of billion years.
Let's hope not. I think we want to see ourselves in the mirror in a couple of billion years.
That's the thing I tell people. They talk about, what about eternity? What about being here in a couple of billion years? Look, I've barely got next Thursday under control.
And you're doing better than I am.
I've barely got next Thursday under control. I don't think I'm going to be able to handle a billion years from now. But anyway, what the eggs do is they're constantly creating random numbers, billions of times a second. And of course, what you're going to get over time is a jagged line.
A chicken?
A what? A what?
A chicken.
Yeah.
You said egg.
Egg. Yeah, you get a chicken.
Good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
But you're going to get this jagged line where the number of where the number of ones go up, or the number of zeros go up. Anyway, this is going to be this very jagged line. And over time, it's going to revert to a mean, revert to whatever mean it's using. What they have found, and this is not speculation, I can find the articles and they're peer reviewed, I can send them to you. Prior to some major world event, the eggs go nuts. And you'll get these big shifts in either positive numbers, negative numbers, whatever they're doing. And that's an indication that something is getting ready to happen somewhere. The biggest shift ever measured was the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks, where these things just went totally nuts. Now, the problem is, it seems like it'll tell you that something's going to happen, but you have no data at all as to what it might be. It's kind of like consciousness and awareness isn't limited to linear forward time.
So it projects backwards, basically.
Projects backwards, yeah.
Yeah. Which makes sense. Theoretically.
And I well,
I'm glad it makes sense to you.
Well, yeah, but they publish every month meaningful statistical anomalies in the egg system, and then they try to tie it to whatever it might be. And I'm not sure they even always get it right, but some things are so big it's just kind of clear, like the Fukushima meltdown.
Still leaking, by the way.
Still leaking, by the way. The eggs start to show something is going to happen prior to people understanding what happened. Look, I think that's amazing. It's just one of those questions of, that means there's a lot to the universe that I don't understand. And guess what? Nobody else does either.
Wait, do you mind if I divert this conversation for a second?
The first rule of Paranormal Rundown is there are no rules of Paranormal Rundown.
All right. All right. Well, I didn't want to completely derail your thought, but I mean, I was thinking this out, right? Uh-huh. There's a way to time travel because of the spooky action. What you could potentially do is quantum entangle two particles together, send them through a beam of light, right, at the speed of light, receive them back in the past, and you could potentially communicate with yourself in the past by doing that. Think about that. Like, you could send yourself messages in the past by sending from the past to the future, but it can only be at the time that you created the machine that would send the particle to the future. You could spin the particle in the past, communicate with yourself in the future.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And tell yourself, potentially, different things. I mean, you could say, like, you could tell yourself all kinds of things. And then with the future, you could communicate with you in the past by spinning the same particle.
Well, I would like that. I mean, I'd like for my 16-year-old self to know 3 words. Dell, Apple, Amazon.
Did they have? Was there a quantum computer in the past that you could communicate with yourself with?
No, but I'm going for the deluxe model.
Okay. Theoretically, this is possible.
No, I'd be happy with just those 3 words. Just give me those 3 words. Well, so
theoretically, it's possible. Technology is not there. Maybe it is. Maybe it's happening right now.
Well, that may be what Google and Northrop Grumman and Lockheed, and I'm pretty sure Amazon's got a quantum computer lab somewhere, don't they, JJ? I mean,
we do indeed.
That's fun.
We have you can actually rent time on our quantum stuff that's in the cloud.
You can rent time to use it.
Yeah.
Just like you used to rent time on mainframes.
You can rent for.
Is it time in the future or the past?
only the present.
All right, only the present.
I just like how we went to random number generator to quantum physics and time travel.
Oh, hey, so okay, let's try something. Why don't you try your random number generator, and we'll all think about melon heads. See if we can influence it.
Okay, let me pull up. I'm going to share this one though. I want to make sure that nobody thinks I'm trying to lie.
And while you're doing that, so the conversation Vic and I had on this the other day was about. I bet you that the tech moguls that run these companies that deal with the quantum computers have to deal with things like sites with paranormal activity. The conversation was along the lines of, do you think when they're picking where they're going to put their big super quantum computer infrastructure, make sure it's not haunted? Because the last thing we need is to have all of this electromagnetic interference, cold spots, whatever, energy waves that happen messing up with our computers.
So they won't be on Skinwalker Ranch,
right?
Exactly.
You wouldn't put your quantum computer on Skinwalker Ranch, or in the
Stanley Hotel,
the Stanley Hotel,
Right,
or the house in Poltergeist, or any of these places.
Which brings up the question: is the shielding that they do enough, or is it? Let's say that you built. Let's say that you were at Homestead 2 or whatever it is at Skinwalker Ranch. And that's where you chose to build your quantum computer plant, right? And now, if you clear away the house, that doesn't necessarily mean the activity is gone, because we've seen activity in places where houses have been demolished.
Sure.
Right? If you dig down 3 stories... Well, 3 stories below that house where it was, is that area clear enough? Right? If you took and dug down 3 stories and built 3 stories above it, and you built this big room and you shielded the whole thing.
Put a foot of copper around it.
Yeah, exactly. Would that be enough? Or is the physical coordinates of where that Homestead 2 was what is physically haunted? Right? Is there still going to be activity in there?
That is an interesting thought, though. How would you shield it properly from that interference?
Well, and
would it be enough?
If the spot that is haunted is inside of that shielding, even if you've cleared everything out, you've dug out all the land, you've removed all the house, all the infrastructure, and you have nothing but empty space there. Well, is the paranormal activity tied to the molecules of the land, or is it tied to that physical location in space and time?
Well, what about this thought? So doesn't CERN have a quantum computer?
I'm sure they do.
I would imagine.
Okay. I heard that they built the whole CERN complex on an old site that was like a temple to Apollo. And
it was probably
local legend that it was a gate to the underworld. So maybe like intentionally you can cross dimensions. Maybe if you were to build a quantum computer.
Well, have you ever seen the ceremony, the public party they did when they opened CERN?
Oh yeah, that was creepy, wasn't it?
It was pretty damn creepy.
It was a little creepy.
Go look.
I don't think I've seen that.
Well, it's kind of like watching a druid ritual or something.
Okay.
It's pretty damn creepy. But okay, first I got one more thing I want to say is well, there needs to be then a service of people who find places in the world that are the most boring, where there's not any electromagnetic interference, where there's nothing that's going to happen to your
no abnormalities, no blips.
Right, just the most boring places you can find.
Dead zones.
Dead zones. So what we're talking about here is a directed intention experiment.
Okay.
A somewhat small scale.
Melonhead. The Melonhead experiment.
Melonhead thing.
So this is like the stuff that I've mentioned before. Is we've touched on a couple of these things before. But Rupert Sheldrake has directed attention experiments on his website. Go out there, sheldrake.org.
How
you can.
How did he go about doing them? Maybe we should follow the scientific principle on
it. In this case, he has these experiments where you choose a partner and you log in to two different computers and you do a joint attention test. And it shows a series of, like, I can't remember, 3 or 4 images. And one of you is the chooser, right? You're focusing on which image you want to choose. And the other is the guesser. And they have to guess which image it is the chooser is choosing. And apparently they've had some really interesting results with that.
Okay.
In fact, when we had the guys from The Wandering Road on, we had Chris and Dean, I told them it would be perfect for the two of them before one of their shows to log onto that site and play with that.
So in this case, would Victor be would Vic be the chooser?
I guess so, since I've got anybody who had the program in front of them could be the chooser.
Okay. All right.
Okay, here is the suggestion from Gus. He wants us to all concentrate heavily on melon heads. And I'm going to hit the F9 key for a while. And whenever Gus, as the honored guest, tells me to, I will let go.
No.
What's that?
No.
I haven't started pressing it yet. Ain't no gas in it. I haven't started pressing.
Right.
Why that motor running? Ain't got no gas in it. Okay. I am starting to press right now. Waiting for the sign from Gus. Concentrating on melon heads.
I'll give it a go.
Okay.
We didn't get melon heads.
Better mystery, remote studying paranormal aspects.
Debunked. All right, cross that one.
Come on. That's an N of 1. No. I think we need to. I think we need to give it an N of at least 3. I mean, we got Infernal Name Diabolus, Ability Faith Healing, The Bender Mystery, Remote Staring, Paranormal Aspects of Sex, and Are There Any Actual Paranormal Experts?
Okay, but now this is let's do 3 times, right? And the third time we'll pick from that list as our next topic. But let's just notice that remote staring is a related topic to what we're trying to do.
So you have to actually watch the spreadsheet.
Right? You're talking about influencing something through consciousness, remote staring, which I assume is something really related to like remote viewing.
Well, no, what that means is
in the same realm.
If you're in a room and there's somebody
because we don't have a quantum computer.
Right, we don't have a quantum computer. They're not on sale this week.
Should we rent space?
Yeah, the rundown doesn't have that kind of a budget.
My understanding is that for a while there, Randonautica actually was renting quantum computer space.
You know, I haven't used that app in a long time, but I have used that app.
All right, let's try.
That should be a topic.
It is. It's definitely in the rundown. Guarantee you.
All right, so let's do it again and see if we come up with another topic that's sort of quantum influence.
So you're counting remote staring as kind of a hit.
Yeah, it's kind of a hit. It's an interesting.
All right, here we
similarity.
Go. Okay, starting the random selection process. Now, you got to give me a few seconds so I can get my mind away from the spreadsheet and onto melon heads.
No.
Okay, here we go. Pressing.
No.
X-ray eyes, X-ray vision, New England faceless people, serious mystery. Sure, go ahead and lick that frog. Ezekiel's wheel. Why would Satan buy souls when they are so freely offered? I'm going to say that is a.
That's a complete miss. What's Ezekiel's wheel?
Oh God,
the Bible.
That topic.
The biblical topic. Okay.
From the You hate that topic?
Or the Bible.
Jay, did you say you hate that topic or you love that topic?
I love that topic.
Okay, we can put that on there. Okay, this last time here. 9. Okay, got my mind on that forest with those big old melon head kids. with big fangs and claws?
No.
Chinese Bosnian pyramids, Patagonian giants, superconsciousness, do we need a Butlerian jihad, Amish hex signs, and Project Blue Book? Okay, I'm going to say that our experiment with an N of 3 was a bust.
Debunked.
But you did get super consciousness.
I did get super consciousness. I absolutely did get super consciousness.
So 2 consciousness-related topics.
2 consciousness-related
out
topics.
Of 3 runs. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's as
interesting.
I think it's as good as any.
That's a pattern. That's a
pattern.
Little bit of a pattern.
So,
why don't you hit it one more time, though?
Okay.
I don't like these topics. Let's take a different topic.
all right, here we go. Well, got to get my mind in the forest with those melon. Look, you got to really see this. I don't have
No. I try this time. You don't think of anything.
Don't think of anything. Make my mind blank.
And we will focus on the melon head kid.
Like, oh yeah, that's good.
Like don't think of purple polar bears kind of thing. Okay.
Think of your happiest memory. How about that?
And the rest of us will think melon head.
Okay, yeah. I got it. Here we go.
Okay. Now.
Let's see. Aggressive comedy response to any paranormal evidence, fantasy proneness, Barbados Vaults, Order of the Golden Dawn, Split Brain Syndrome, King Arthur, and Arthurian Legends. No way.
No. Okay. Well, debunked.
Debunked.
Right.
Hello. This is Cedric Dankworth Smythe, your favorite psychic butler. I have to say that name correctly. Dankworth Smythe. With just enough emphasis to show that I am of superlative breeding. As all Dankworth Smythes are, of course. I believe it's time for a bit of dungeon talk. We have done that in a while. But in this episode, we had a long conversation concerning random number generators. You can skip it if you wish, but if you agree with Dave, doing so might alter the seed of the random number generator that controls your life. If you agree with Vic, who says we live in base reality, it doesn't matter. But that's up to you. Do you want to take that risk? Skip or not? Now it's time for Dungeon Talk.
I'll tell you a weird story. It's not weird. It's just I just found it fascinating. When I lived in Charlotte, there's a huge IBM research center there in Charlotte. And nobody can see it because it's back in the woods. They designed it to be totally invisible from the road. But one year they had the random number generator engineering contest for local students. And man, people came up with some awesome random number generators.
Yeah.
One guy made this thing, this big trough, and at each end of the trough was a truck tire. And they were spinning the truck tires, counter-rotating like that, sending up a whole bunch of droplets of water. And then he had 100 laser beams lined up. And he'd pulse those laser beams. And so if it hit a drop of water, the laser beam didn't get through. If it missed the drop of water, then the laser beam got through. And so you'd get this 100-digit number that was, of course, binary, 011, 011, this kind of thing. But it created a genuine random number stream. It's really hard to get random numbers. You can get pseudo-random numbers anytime using all kinds of methods.
How good was the distribution of those random numbers?
It was considered by the mathematicians there at IBM to be truly random.
Well, that's good enough for me.
And then one guy had, it was kind of a takeoff on the guy. So, one of the biggest encryption random number generators in the world right now is a wall of, it keeps growing, a couple of hundred of lava lamps.
Okay.
So in the storefront in Los Angeles is a wall with shelves with all kinds of lava lamps on there.
And do they then go out once every 5 minutes and poll the stoned people on the street and say, throw out a number? And they go, 52, man.
And they're all kind of, oh, you're right. All these guys are going, oh, yeah.
29.
That's good. No, they've got a really super high resolution camera taking a picture of that lava lamp wall and then converting that to a random number stream. And once again, the mathematicians have decided it's truly random. And
I don't understand why it's so difficult.
Well, part of it has to do with human bias. Okay, if I say, give me a stream of 12 random numbers, 12 random digits. Okay, you're going to do something, you're going to go, 3, 1, 2, 4. Oh, heck, I don't want to use 3 again. I used it a minute ago, 3, 5. There's always something in your mind that's telling you to try to randomize it further. And of course, with 12 digits, you can't tell anything. Mm-hmm. But humans just aren't really good at coming up with random stuff. There's always order in it. So if you go out, you can now go out and buy a genuine random number generator that you can put in your desktop. They probably got something you can put in your laptop. But what that is, it's it's two very noisy electronic circuits trying to talk to each other.
Right, and it's reading the distortion.
It's reading the distortion, right? Or sometimes for a while, one company there was making they're putting a little piece of cesium in there.
Nothing like a little cesium to brighten up your day.
Well, we're not talking much. We're talking, and it was pretty
It's great, but you do have to wear the hazmat suit.
You do have to wear the hazmat
suit.
But then the one that I liked the best was a guy. He had a robot. It was a 2x4 matrix of griddles, and so somebody made 8 containers of pancake batter, and the robot was making pancakes just as fast as it could make pancakes. Okay, so
okay,
and then flipping them, and you would get, of course, a random distribution of bubbles and little holes and little places where more heat hit the pancake, brown edges, all that kind of stuff, and then taking a picture of that and using that as the seed. But it was really, really fun to watch this robot making pancakes.
And that, folks, is how IHOP was born.
Yes, that's right. IHOP was never all about pancakes. It was all about providing genuine random numbers.
Hello, everybody. This is Vic Hermanson. Thank you so much for listening to the Paranormal Rundown, Countdown to 2025, Part 3. Next week we'll close out Season 1, and we'll be right back to creating a new Paranormal Rundown every 2 weeks. We are always looking for guests. So if you can do paranormal dork talk in your sleep, if you can tell me about the Wolfman, the Dogman, the albino alien living behind your shed, then by all means contact us at feedback@paranormalrundown.com. The music you heard in the show is from either Lobo Loco, Smart Sound, or is simply in the public domain. If we used any media clips, which I don't think we did, we used them under the protection of the Fair Use Doctrine. When I was talking about expanding upon the Melonhead experiment with the Zener cards, all I really meant was that I've added a set of Zener cards to the Paranormal Rundown topic list, bringing it up to above 2,800, more than 2,800, and probably in a future episode we're going to test each other on Zener card ability.
Who can figure out the squiggle over the star, over the square, over the circle? I doubt any of us can. The Paranormal Rundown is a joint production of myself, Vic Hermansen, Dave Griffith, J.J. Johnson, and Father Michael Birdsong. We very much hope to have both J.J. and Father Birdsong back on active duty sometime soon, as the Gang of Nerds is just not the same without them. This show is copyright 2024 Gang of Nerds Media. Thank you, and we will talk to you again next week.